So how'd you guys come up with Snake Bros?
Brothers of the Serpent. So it's like a lot of things on our show. It's multiple. It's got layers of meaning.
Okay.
We are brothers.
Yep.
So we have been talking about this kind of stuff for a long time. And then the serpent is an ancient symbol for wisdom or knowledge, and it implies the seeking of wisdom and knowledge, or the keeping of wisdom and knowledge, right?
Or the bringer of knowledge.
Could be the yes. Mm-hmm. So the gods that are associated with it are the bringers of knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Right.
But a brotherhood of the serpent are like knowledge keepers.
Gotcha.
And seekers.
Gotcha.
So this is a play on those words.
Cool.
Brothers of the serpent.
Cool.
Right?
Cool. Love it. And how long have you guys been doing the podcast thing?
6 years,
Yeah,
almost 7.
2016, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. 6.
What? That's not. Is that right?
I don't know.
Is
Don't
it
quote me on
8
that.
years?
Maybe coming up.
Yo,
on 8 years.
Stash, what up, brother? How are you, man?
How
Wait,
long have we
how
been
old
saying
am I?
6 years?
Yeah, that's true.
Well, you
I
got
don't know.
300 episodes, man.
What up, brother?
It's been a while.
Here
Yeah.
in the first
and
3
it's,
minutes, fucking legend.
Man, it's been
All
an
good.
amazing journey. I mean, when we
That's good,
started
man.
it, we didn't do any. It was audio only. We had no idea that anyone would ever listen.
Yeah.
We didn't tell anybody.
We didn't do any marketing.
No marketing.
Yeah.
The thing was, we were having these amazing conversations just between us, and I was like, bro, we should do a podcast and just record this stuff.
Yeah.
And then I think he told one of our friends after we published the first, he was like, hey,
Yes,
man, we
sir.
just published
Yo,
a podcast
whatever.
episode. And this guy went and listened to it, and he's like, yeah, it's okay, maybe you should work on this and this. And we just went from there. And then, I don't know, 6 months later, I'm like, dude, like 100 people just downloaded that episode we published. Who are these people?
Yeah.
And it's just grown from there.
That's
So,
awesome.
Yeah.
So what kind of stuff do you guys dive into, just for the audience so they're aware?
Our main topic is ancient, really ancient civilizations. I mean, you could say lost civilizations, but we're both have been in construction. We have done a lot of building. We run heavy machinery. So we're very interested in sort of like, how do they do this? They're moving enormous blocks. They're constructing things with precision that have alignments. If they're off from true north, it's just this tiny little fraction of a degree. And we're interested in that because we've had to lay out buildings, and we've you're going through and you're putting the pieces on, and that like most of the time on normal construction, your margin of error is more like a quarter of an inch, not like like tiny amounts like they've done with enormous blocks.
Right.
So it's
On a 13-acre building.
yeah, right. And we've planted vineyards, or orchards where we get the surveying equipment and we lay out where all the trees are going to go, and we're trying to make straight lines.
Yep.
And then we're standing up looking at it, and we're like, the Great Pyramid is like 10 of these.
Yeah. It's crazy. Crazy.
So that's really like one of our favorite things. And going to Egypt, it's like that. We're looking at it
Stash.
from a construction standpoint. Like,
Yep.
I think people of any profession kind of do this.
Yep.
No matter what your profession is, if you see
How's the volume?
a
Is the
job that was done
podcast
by
too
someone in
loud
your
for me to
profession, you
talk?
kinda look at it and you're like, I wonder
Or
how
is the
they
volume
did
okay?
this part.
Yeah.
You said it was okay yesterday. I
So we
appreciate
are
that.
as
Yeah.
well.
I don't use headphones,
You
right?
guys are going back to Egypt in February. You're taking a tour of people out there in
Yeah.
February again?
Right.
I did get the
Ben,
6-star
yeah,
pre-workout
shout out to Ben.
explosion
He's fun to work
because
with.
they
He's
want my
awesome.
caffeine.
Yep.
I've been off caffeine for like 2 months now.
Nice.
It's gonna be
I'm gonna see if caffeine will help with my speed runs. It's good, thanks, brother.
Yeah, sold out. And then, we were intending to go to Baalbek, but that kind of fell through.
Cool,
because of
brother.
all
Thanks,
events.
man.
So we just decided to do a second.
Yeah, it's my only
tour
source of
instead.
caffeine.
Kind
I
of
really want to go see Baalbek.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
I'm very
The
upset.
fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is like
And so what other
hermetically
stuff do you guys
sealed.
kind of cover on the show? I mean, I saw you got an 11-part series on the path of the pole. I want to talk a little bit about
Yes.
the pole.
We talk a lot about geology. We talk about physics.
Cosmology.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm just gonna drink a
You
little
guys,
water.
Just from listening to you, and I know just from talking to you just this morning, you guys are both very well educated and very bright. But your knowledge of physics and everything else comes from where? Where did you get
That's
it?
what I was doing in China, just the
Yeah,
caffeine.
which means like we're mostly wrong all the time, especially with physics.
Helped a lot with the fucking classes. Holy
Yeah,
shit.
The thing
Then I ran out.
is maintain the curiosity, explore, and then also sort of we have this. The philosophy on our show is like the certificate of ignorance. In other words, like admit that in general we're still the human race in general is still figuring things out,
Right.
trying to explore the universe around us and what is going on. And so there's this tendency, though, especially with modern science, to sort of act like we kind of got most of it.
100%.
Yeah, we got it figured out. There's some details around the edges that maybe we don't understand yet, but pretty much we understand what's going on. And I completely disagree.
Completely agree.
And I think that, you find out when you read, like, whether it's, some papers in archaeology or in physics, or you listen to these guys, they're like, no, we kind of don't really have it nailed down
Exactly.
yet. Yeah.
Right.
So we call that the certificate of ignorance. Like,
Love
you
it.
got to write it yourself.
Yep.
And you put it up on your wall, and you just remind yourself every
I
day.
use
"We
like
don't
ice water though.
know
I
what's
can't
going
down
on
this.
yet."
Oh,
Right,
my
exactly.
head.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at every point throughout history, we've kind of thought that we've had everything figured out, like in terms
Yes.
of and we've always been like, oh, we're at the pinnacle, we're at the peak, we know everything, and it's like, 50 years later, 10 years later, sometimes 1 year later, it's like, we didn't really quite get
Right.
that, and then looking back upon our past, upon our history, it's like, wow, we really knew nothing, and future versions of us are going to say the same thing about
Yeah,
us today.
Exactly.
we have a joking phrase about this.
Yeah,
It's-
really.
There's a manual for how the universe works, and it's always the final edition.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
right.
updated every day,
It's always
Right.
updated.
but
Right.
it's the
Love it.
final. People treat it like it's the final edition.
Yeah, right, yeah,
Yeah.
love it. Yeah, it's so true, and it just speaks to the importance of just curiosity and just
Yes.
just continuing to ask the question. And I know you guys probably get a lot of it. And
Here we
just
go.
me from my first.
I'm
bunch
gonna be
of,
so friggin' hyper
7
now.
Episodes is like I get a lot of it. Like people, no, that's not right.
It's my
Right.
first dose of caffeine in like 2 months right
yeah,
here.
Like, yeah, well, do we? We thought Clovis first.
Sure.
For everything. I mean, archaeology, the mainstream is just constantly rewriting that story of human history every day because we learn something new, and it's like it's so hard to change the paradigm, or not even change the paradigm, but just explore new possibilities and alternatives because people are so dogmatic and just so like,
Oh my gosh.
no, this is the way, this is the answer, this is the truth, and it's like, let's just keep an open mind. Like, can we just like explore like the question? And I love that about your guys' podcast. And I think that's why you guys are, so popular and have such a
thank you.
successful podcast is because you guys just explore the question. It's like open-minded exploration of the truth.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think the world becomes so much more interesting and fascinating and fun when you realize, wait a minute, we don't have this figured out, and this is a mystery. Then there's something to be discovered, and that's just a great feeling.
Hey, sorry for falling
to
asleep last
the
night.
Discovery.
Yep.
I
fell asleep.
We also talk about this.
Sorry,
We're not
brother, I
ever
fell
going to
asleep.
Find the complete whole truth. It's probably not going to happen. We can get closer to it, but it's that process which is so fascinating and makes
I did too. LOL.
life
Nice.
worth living
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah.
The mystery.
Yep. Yeah, well said. Yeah, it's that old saying that science advances one death at a time.
Yeah. One funeral at a time.
One funeral at a time.
Yeah.
But if people were open-minded, it wouldn't.
I should do my iPad.
Like,
Nice. That's nice.
We could advance so much faster if we
Sounds
kept an open
comfortable.
mind and it didn't take a death to overturn some old paradigm.
Yeah.
So,
That's right.
So yeah, that's awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to today talking through some of this stuff with you. I know we share a lot of the same interests, so
Yes.
I'm excited that you guys were willing to come on and try some baby new podcast or some new show.
Oh man, anytime. This is great.
Yeah,
I wish we'd have had this studio for our baby podcast. I love what you've done here, man. This is amazing.
This is
Yeah.
awesome.
Ever evolving.
Yeah.
Ever evolving, for
It
sure.
is always evolving.
Yeah. But well, cool, man. Yeah. So let's dive into a topic. Where do you think is a good place to start?
Well, first let's why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, it's that open exploration, It's like trying to find answers. Like, I feel like that we don't have a good explanation for... I feel like that it's important for humans to have a good, agreed-upon base reality. I was kind of mentioning this at breakfast this morning, but like if we don't all have the same understanding of our past and the same and it's not we don't have to agree upon it. That's not what I'm saying. But there's certain events that have happened throughout human history that they either happened or they didn't happen. And currently, like the Younger Dryas is a great example. Like we're being told that, oh no, everything's fine, nothing to see here. All the megafauna went extinct because of overhunting. And the sea levels all completely changed. Not all during that 1200-degree Younger Dryas period, but the sea levels were dramatically changing. The temperature was changing. We're finding evidence of meteor impacts. And just cataclysmic time period, and it's like nobody really understands that, and nobody really is talking about that. And so I think the Carolina Bays is another good example, something that was just talked about. And it's like there's so many things out there that we just that we just accept as fact or the way things are, without really asking the question and going back and exploring and diving into old theories that may or may not be true. They may or may not hold any weight. They may just be something before the computer, before Google Earth, that we just kind of made up and kind of go along with. I think that the pyramids as tombs.
Yes.
That's like one of those old 150, 200-year-old theories. Then there's never been a pharaoh found in a pyramid. It's like well, let's ask those questions. Let's explore those topics. And so for me, asking the questions and kind of exploring some topics that make people uncomfortable, who who think that we do have the answers. We are at the pinnacle. We are at the peak of human civilization. I think it's just important that we talk about this stuff, and because I think that a base reality for a general understanding of this world that we're living in, that we're operating in, that we're trying to navigate and understand and make decisions about for not only ourselves as individuals but as a species. I think it's important that we explore our past, and that could tell us a lot about our future. And so asking those questions, I think, is critical. I think the UFO thing, which I want to maybe get into with you guys a little bit later, that's we ought to know if that's real. That's something
that's happening.
We should probably as a species agree on that.
Right.
It's kind of a big deal.
Yes.
So stuff like that, I guess. That's kind of why I'm in this.
And and we definitely need to talk about that. We have another thing we joke about on our show with the UFO thing, is that it's so strange that it almost doesn't look like it could be just regular aliens and nuts and bolts craft showing up.
Yeah.
So we have this idea that eventually somebody like that will show up, and they'll be like, "Have you guys been seeing this weird stuff too? Because we have it on our planet, and we have no idea what it is either."
Well,
it's the UFO stuff is really strange.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Yeah, and getting stranger and getting so mainstream now.
Yes.
Which is fantastic. Like, I felt like I've been following this topic for 35 years almost. I mean, really since Bob
Yes,
was
a year. Okay.
I've been into this thing for a long time, but you couldn't really talk about it with that many people, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, because people were like, yeah, it's kind of like, you mean, is it kind of like Bigfoot,
Right.
It's like, no,
But but yes.
I don't know if you guys are Bigfoot people, but
sometimes Bigfoot shows up after UFO sightings, which is weird.
Yeah, you're right.
I don't know if they're connected.
Yeah.
But we can take it back to, because first of all, you have the bases, and so we can always talk about Egypt. That's one of our favorite subjects. We're about to go there.
Cool.
One of the main things that we both noticed when going to Egypt, you have to realize you're just like with geology. You're looking through layers and layers and layers. Except in Egypt's case, it's occupation. Right. So with geology, it's time and small floods and big weather events and everything that leave sediment, cover things over, change things or whatever, or erosion. Right, so it's either deposition or erosional. And in Egypt, you have the same thing, but it's people doing it. In some places, people are piling stuff on. Other places, they're taking it away. Mm-hmm. They're quarrying the old stones from the pyramids and removing it. Yep. Or in other places, they've been living in this temple for thousands of years and bringing animals and goats in there and just living in there in general and just piling up stuff.
Yep. And
then also building on them again. So something will fall down, and then they'll repair it, and then it'll fall down again, and they'll repair it. And so you're looking through thousands of years of layers of renovation and reuse.
Yeah, no doubt.
All the way up to the modern time.
Right.
You're walking down a path that was made 50 years ago for tourists, you know, looking at something off to the side that's 1,000 years old, and then farther out there's something that's 4,000 years old, you know, and in the middle of that there's something that might be 20,000 years old. We just don't know.
Right. Yeah.
So, and it's interesting in general. This is not always the case, but in general, the older stuff is using bigger stones with more difficult materials.
Yep.
And is just in general a little more anomalous.
Right.
You know, now the dynastics were some of the dynastic periods. They were phenomenal architects and engineers and builders. Like their temples are just amazing to walk through. You know, but when you're walking through them, every surface is covered in writing, is painted. Some of the ceilings, some of the paint still remains, and they've cleaned it up, especially like in the Temple of Hathor. And it's just beautiful up there. And it's the night sky, or it's telling you there's all these symbols and everything. But every surface is got words with pictures. It's just absolutely decorated. And then the sites themselves are open. The pillars are far apart, and you can tell people are supposed to come in here and look and see and read and learn. And then you go into a pyramid, and it's like being in a machine.
Yeah.
It's completely different. You feel like you're sneaking around in the underbelly of a city with all the machinery. Maybe you're not supposed to be in there, or it's dangerous. You know, this is the maintenance shaft for something. The Osirian is like this as well. Like being in the Osirian is like being in the basement of some large structure. It's right now it's full of rubble and water and everything, but if that wasn't there would be these deep pits that you could fall into easily, and you're kind of like silent, you know.
It's so true.
So,
and that's why you're here today, Toad.
Because
It's the only GoldenEye channel on right now. I think Docker, actually.
What is it? Yeah. If the Osirian isn't like a temple to Osiris, but has some function other than that, then what exactly is it?
Yeah. What do you think on what do you guys think on the Great Pyramid? Like what in terms of like what it
This AI is so saucy, man.
You know, the land of Kim, there's the Chris Stone's theory, there's potential irrigation or water pump theory.
Right.
You know, like
those all make more sense than the tomb theory.
Yeah.
And in general, like I think we're in agreement that it's the idea that it's a large project that benefits the whole population makes more sense. So power plant, a chemical plant, or metallurgy, I don't know.
Sick emote.
But the other thing with those pyramids is that they're connected to the entire plateau in some way. There's, when you're outside the pyramid itself, there's tiling, and then under the tiling are channels. We were talking about this the other day. And
so the pyramid complex there's a lot more than just the pyramid and the tunnels inside of it, but they are connected to other. They look like drains. It's like, so you have the grounds around the pyramid have humongous limestone tiles that could be as big as this floor, and underneath them in many places are granite stones that have a trough cut in them that's running along, and then they'll empty out into these granite bowls.
Right.
So there was something going on under the ground, and this was cool. The last
clearly functional for some.
Yes, there is a function going on, and who knows how they might be connected to other chambers in the pyramid. We don't know.
Right.
They're finding evidence of more chambers and internal structures in that pyramid.
Right. Because of the renovation and reuse, it's like, well, what was the original function of, versus what everything looks like today.
Yeah.
One of the pyramid complexes went to, I can't remember which one it is, but the causeway that goes all the way up has one of those troughs run down the center of it all the way down.
Yo, Retronomicon, what up, man?
Is that
Thanks, brother.
Something like that. Yeah, one of those.
I've been following your facility grinds, my friend, and your dupes.
Under the channels running around.
You're duping 44, right?
We're told this is like a sewage system, but the whole thing ends up
Crazy,
in
bro.
a relatively small granite bowl, and you're like, no, that's not how sewage works.
Right.
What up, man?
There was a guy that was with us on the last tour.
I'm pacing 22 occasionally.
Friends. He's a great guy, but he farms. And we were talking to what
Actually, most of the
what
time.
are some of the other
Like, all
things
my starts
besides
are
the power
22.
plant and some of these other ideas that have come about that
Like, that's
would
an
be
8
worth it
pause
for society
with like a
to
3-shot
invest
last
this
cam.
much labor and time and effort into constructing?
Getting
what
there
else?
43
It's
soonish,
like
fingers and toes
they could be
crossed.
making fertilizer.
Well said. Toes
So it
too.
would be like a chemical processing plant, which I think Yusuf has even talked about, like
Yep.
the different. I don't know. There's. I think that's
And that's
a
the
pretty
land of
compelling
Kim
idea.
also talks about this. Yeah, I mean the idea that they were doing something.
Yeah,
with
that's like
chemical
this is
processing.
22
right.
pace. I gotta go this fast.
Yeah. So what about in terms of the date? You know, in terms of the
Pretty shit.
So there's good arguments on both sides.
Yeah, it is.
From like on the celestial side, you know, and like in terms of when the big pyramids were built.
Yeah.
And,
It's fun, though.
You know,
It's
but then
relaxing.
there's
It's a
some
really
carbon
nice
dating, you know, that all seems to
return to
date
GoldenEye
back
level,
to,
'cause it's
when
short.
You know, the
Yeah.
2500 BC time period. You know, so what's your guys' thoughts on the dates of those structures? And then I'll ask you about the Sphinx, which I think everybody.
Because I haven't played in like a few months now.
It's old. Yeah. I haven't landed on anything with it. I would not be surprised if some of the larger
I might try in English
or at least
next session,
something
but
was there a long
I
time
don't know.
ago. Because again, we're talking about people would go and add on to stuff. Again,
I think this level's just better on
you know, like the
Japanese
Great Pyramid could be
in terms of
some of it
lag
may be very
and
old.
not being
But
as
one of the things
laggy
with the carbon dates, like, is it the
in the ending
Is it the bent pyramid that has the wood?
It is.
and not
Yes,
getting
yeah.
shot as much.
Yeah, but you know when you're looking at that wood,
It makes
yes,
the
cedar in there. You're wondering
the big
like,
area less troll.
Is that original
Right.
or not?
Right.
Because people did come in here and explore these things, and in some cases, like
Yeah,
with this,
some people
this
say
bent
they do
pyramid,
like
you
English.
had to
It's a
build
little slower
structures
in
to get up
English.
to the top of a-
It's
of
like
a
you're playing in
huge,
molasses.
chamber to get into a
It's like
little
you're
tiny
playing
doorway to
underwater.
get to the next part.
It's
Right,
everything.
so,
It just seems
I don't know,
slower,
and
and
then
you can
you're-
line
and
up
then
stuff
the
better. I
wood
don't
is
know.
in these- there's like multiple.
I don't know if there's
different
more
false
lags. What
floors.
helps with the camera
Right,
explosions
Right, and the wood is
too.
down in there,
I have
so
no idea.
you can believe that people
And,
are
like,
putting
them
those
blowing
in
up.
to lift things out
Yeah.
from beneath these false floors.
Instead of being
Yeah,
absolutely like
Yeah.
I don't know how old they are.
laser
Right,
precise
What
on
about
Japanese.
the paint
Or I
that
just be
Weiss,
making that up.
Howard Weiss found that?
Oh, in the Great Pyramid,
Great
and the
Pyramid.
relieving chambers. Yeah.
Why won't they carbon date that
Right.
and show us all that it comes from that period?
Well, because they know. Yeah, exactly.
They already know. There's no need to do science.
There's no need to do that test because we already know what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Until they do it, people are gonna ask. that
I'm just used to doing
Yeah.
Japanese, man.
It's a reasonable question.
That's what I
It's a reasonable question.
just put
And
like fucking
the
a
fact
lot of
that they
hours
got
into.
So angry that some people took
Same
some
with
samples
back,
out of
interesting,
there
bro.
Is it interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No doubt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Zahi was basically saying these guys claim that the pyramid
Interesting,
is
'cause I already said he
5,000
likes
years old or whatever. I'm like, they didn't
Japanese
say
on
that.
facility.
Yeah. I think
So
you're
weird.
afraid that it will be that old though.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So
Maybe he
interesting.
knows it. Maybe he already
Maybe he
knows.
knows, yes, because you know Zahi's connection to the ARE and just that whole situation is very strange.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I remember when I first saw.
Sorry for the ads, man. If the ads are a
internal
real pain in the
structure,
ass, I
a diagram of
apologize.
The internal structure of
When
the
I get a
pyramid,
job,
I thought,
I will turn
it
them
looks
down.
like the king's chamber and this whole thing was like built first, and then somebody came and
Put a triangle over top of
put
it.
a giant triangle on it to protect it.
Yeah.
I just wondered about that. Like maybe there was like a sacred mound or something like that, and people had built maybe an observatory there at some point in the past, and then later it
One
just,
sec.
people keep coming back and adding on to it.
This is a
it's
pretty
not
good.
unheard
I'm
of.
in love.
This is a pretty good diagram, and notice the.
Oh my gosh, you're
the
here!
mound.
I love
So
it. How are
the
you, baby?
ground level beneath the pyramid.
Right.
This is the other thing.
Oh,
As
I
a
love it. How
construction
are you?
guy, you come in
That's
to
terrible.
build a building. You flatten your work space, your service.
Okay, hold on,
They
guys.
purposefully left this.
I might have
mound
to turn off
in
stream.
there and had to build the layers of
Apologize.
the layers of stone around that.
They just
Why
didn't
would
want
you
the
do-
pyramid sliding around.
Yeah, you don't want it. You want it plugged in. You don't want it sliding around. But that's the thing. Is like, why would you do that and make the job so much harder?
Yeah.
But is it one of the quote unquote primordial
Sorry,
mounts?
bros.
This is the
I
question.
will,
Is that,
be
is that
back in a
something
sec.
much older?
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's level on the outsides. It's leveled to within like some ridiculous
Yes.
amount. I
They
mean,
they
yeah.
flattened the plateau.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the other thing. Is like you imagine the builders standing there and they're like, yeah, so let's just flatten all of that,
Yeah.
cut off all the rock over there, and take it over here and make tiles and fill in those holes with the rest of it
Right.
and make it all flat.
Right.
And
right,
then we'll
right.
build some, but leave a little mound right there because we need to put a big pyramid right there.
Yeah, yeah. I was doing I did a podcast with Ralph Ellis, who a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about the bent pyramid and the red pyramid, and he did this analysis of it back in the 90s, and it was like basically if you take the bent pyramid and you take the top part of the bent pyramid, so the top half, like after the bend,
Yes.
it's a perfect Pythagorean triangle. It's like a 20, 21, 29 Pythagorean triangle. And if you look at the red pyramid, that is also a 20, 21, 29 Pythagorean triangle. And if you extend the bent pyramid all the way out to where it would be if it wasn't bent,
Yeah.
it's the exact same dimensions as the red pyramid. So that was
That
pretty,
is interesting.
that was
yeah.
pretty crazy. Yeah, I haven't released that one yet. It'll probably be out
cool.
before this comes out. But he did some really incredible work on it in the 90s, and he's like, I don't know why nobody's talking about this.
Yeah.
Like this was like 30 years ago, and it's
Wow.
yeah. And so I mean, basically the reason for the audience that's so incredible is that Pythagoras he was like 500 BC or 450
Yeah.
BC, you know,
Yeah.
and we credit the Greeks for everything, but
Right.
but the Egyptians were incredible, and they very likely had, you know, almost certainly had, you know, knowledge of advanced geometry.
Absolutely.
A couple of thousand years at least before we give them credit for it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you see that in the pyramid, you see it in the vases potentially, you know, that you see a lot of that geometry. Now, I know there was a pretty good debunking video coming out that debunked some of the mathematics in the vases actually. That you know, so that part of that for me is, you know, I don't know. We got to do more. We got to do more research. We got to
Yeah.
you know, we got to really dive into that a bit more to figure out, you know, it seems way too coincidental to have all of that math, you know, with the radial transversal pattern and the you know, the pi and phi all over those things. Like, seems like too much of a coincidence to have all that stuff in there, you know. But either way, the Egyptians knew. They were very I mean, I think it's beyond a shadow of a doubt now. They had knowledge of advanced geometry, you know, at least at points in their history. And so, you know, for mainstream academics and Egyptologists today just to completely ignore that and to credit the Greeks for, you know, the advent of, you know, of essentially what we know about, you know, of geometry today is kind of, that doesn't make much sense to me. And that, you know, and it's like one of those things that like, why, you know, it's one of those things that like for this podcast, like to talk about some of that stuff and to get it out there into the public more and to, you know, to be like, well, why do we learn this in school if the Egyptians were doing this stuff like thousands of years before, you know, it was supposedly invented by Pythagoras?
Right.
Who coincidentally had just come back from a trip to Egypt.
Yeah.
Where
these
you know,
Greek thinkers went to Egypt to learn.
Yeah.
They come back and they're like, hey, I got some new math.
Yeah,
And people
yeah.
are like, wow, you just invented that. That's amazing.
Right. It's incredible. Yeah. God, you're so smart.
We were also taught really about this stuff you're talking about. The bent pyramid is great, and we were taught that, well, the bent pyramid was a mistake.
Yeah,
you know, they didn't realize, these morons back there that were building these pyramids that it was going to be too steep and it would collapse upon itself. So then they were like, oh,
Right.
let's bend it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But
like,
yeah, it's actually, that pyramid is amazing. If you look at all the pyramids in Egypt, most of them are missing their casing stones. Some of them have a few remnants of casing stones that were buried.
Here.
A lot of the casing stones around the bases of some of them still remain because the quarrying of the casing stones piled up and buried the bottom casing stones, so they're still preserved. The bent pyramid has the most. And the reason, well, what we've been told, the reason for that is that they actually all are cut to tilt inward towards the body of the pyramid. So you can't just go in there and break one loose and slowly slide it out. You have to slide it uphill to get it out.
Okay.
And so you can tell that they did quarry a lot of the stones, the casing stones off that pyramid, but they just gave up. It was too much work.
Yeah, so it has, I'll
Head
back
over
up
to this
here.
Great pyramid.
It has most of its casing stones
And the
still on
casing
it.
stones
And they're
are enormous and beautiful. It's
they're
amazing
beautiful.
Yeah.
to see. It would have been such
Look at the
amazing
line.
thing.
This is the reason that this picture is tilted is because I'm trying to get that edge line. Like, look how
That's crazy.
amazing it is. And then you can see it's difficult with photographs, but you can see that people are standing underneath, but the casing stones are sloped inward, like a little bit down
towards the body of the
towards
pyramid.
the body of the pyramid. Here, like, see this? This is, this makes them very difficult to remove. And then there's this interesting look how they've been degrading here. But there's Kyle looking up and taking a photo of the underside.
I'm standing. I could be out of the rain if it ever rained there.
Yeah.
Those things are sticking way out.
The casing stones are far more substantial than a lot of the core masonry. They're very enormous.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Beautifully done. And I mean, this is engineering and execution on just an amazing scale.
Yeah.
Look at that line.
Wow. And what's the angle there? Is it like
I don't know.
Oh man,
Here you go. I took this. I'm standing.
dude?
I took the picture standing on the archaeologists have dug down and found the corner of the socle, the bedrock platform that the pyramid was on.
Yeah.
So I'm standing right at the corner of where the corner casing stone would have been, looking up at the corner.
Wow.
So that's not even the peak. That's
Yeah, you're looking
at the top is where it bends.
We're looking at the bend.
Right. Yeah. That's crazy.
And what's interesting is you get in this pyramid and you climb all around. You go down the descending passageway. You get into it and you climb way up this scaffolding to get to the top of a big chamber, and you get in some other tunnels. And all of that is happening far below the bend, because in the top, all the way up at the top, there's another shaft that goes out and goes up. And I climbed out all the way up that thing. I wasn't supposed to. It was totally legal. Shh, be quiet.
Yeah.
I climbed all the way up and looked out, and there's a little tiny square opening on the outside of this pyramid, and it's just below the edge of the bend.
Wow.
So all that climbing we did, and all the climbing I did up this shaft, and I'm still haven't gotten up into the top part of the pyramid yet. So this is the other thing about these structures, and even the Great Pyramid has this issue, is most of the stuff that's in them is actually below ground surface. And there's a few things up in the body of the pyramid, but most of the pyramid is a complete unknown and just assumed to be nothing but core masonry, rough core masonry even.
Yeah.
You'll hear or read these people like, well, they just would they'd put rough stones in there, fill it with sand. They didn't care. They're just trying to fill up space.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Look at how, I find that hard to believe.
Yep. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, amazing. Any other thoughts on pyramids, before we move? I mean, any big picture overview revelation for you guys? I mean, you've been there several times. You've seen these things, but
I think that I was a lot more into going into these specific ideas in the beginning that were not, once you find out, well, it's not a tomb, or maybe it's not a tomb.
Yeah.
Really diving into these other ideas about what it might be was kind of, I'd get hooked on that. But now after having been in so many, I have no idea what these things are.
I have become convinced that we have no freaking clue.
Our mindset is so far off from whatever the mindset was that was setting out to do these building projects. I can't fathom it. I don't know what it is, especially after being inside. This doesn't make sense. For example, the antechamber to the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid is one of the most confusing rooms.
Yeah.
It is so strange. The granite, because by the time you're in there, the whole tunnel has turned to granite.
Is the Grand Gallery or
past the Grand Gallery?
Okay.
And
leading to the king's chamber.
You're going into the king's chamber. There's this tiny little antechamber.
Yep.
And the granite in there there's round parts. They call it wainscoting. There's shelves up high. There's nubs sticking out somewhere. There's notches and just all this
It's
stuff
like standing in a
there.
machine with pieces missing.
It is the strangest thing.
But it looks like it's intentional.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely intentional.
And the other thing I would point out about the king's chamber is that it's basically, the boxes in the Serapeum.
Yeah.
This is just a tunnel leading you into the inside of a box.
The king's chamber is a box.
It's a giant granite box. It's a multi-piece box with a box inside it.
Right. Yeah. There's another one in the underneath the step pyramid, but you walk around the outside of it and you see, like, you recognize, you're like, oh, this is a miniature king's chamber. It's built with long narrow pieces of granite that they've sort of stacked up to make this multi-piece box, and it's it's the same kind of shape, and you're like, oh yeah, if I was very small and inside this thing, it would be like being in the king's chamber. It's the same. It's so they're building a huge box, and then putting a single piece box inside that.
Right. Yeah,
it's
that's
just
crazy.
wild.
Yeah, and the dimensions on the king's chamber, again, I just learned this, that was 10 by 20 royal cubits.
Okay.
Yeah, so 10 by 20 royal cubits, which is like 52.4 centimeters is a royal cubit, and you have 7 hands in a cubit, and you have 4 fingers in a hand.
Huh.
And so that tells you that if you do the math, then every finger is 18.714 millimeters. And what we're just finding now on the vases is that the red granite super precision vases were all made using that 18.714 finger
measurement
system.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
The old finger system.
The old finger
That's
system.
a good one.
Yeah.
We later moved on to feet.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Fingers are not precise enough.
Right.
We need feet.
Right.
That's cool.
Yeah. It's really cool.
Can you just tell me? I mean, obviously, you've had a lot of time to study these vases, and I'm wondering. You say the precision red granite ones. So you think that the precision level is connected to the stone type?
I do, yeah. It seems very clear that the red granite are the most accurate of the vases, and so I started saying vases after I interviewed Ralph Ellis last week. Like I've said vases my whole life, but I think vase is so much more sophisticated.
It does.
Yeah. But yeah, the red granite ones are, and I think it's probably the same. You guys tell me, but from the statues that you see, like in. Oh God, what's that place that looks like
Luxor?
Tanis and Luxor.
Luxor has some beautiful statues in it.
Yeah. The red granite ones, I know that they've done some super precise work in that as well. It's like Aswan granite, basically. But yeah, so Adam Young has that OG vase. That's made out of that Aswan granite, and then I have the 2 spinner vases and the 1 thin-walled vase that's made out of the same material as Adam's OG vase. You see that precision in those very, very clearly. You see it in a handful of other ones, maybe not quite to the exact same level as you see in the red granite, but close. Actually, in maybe 3 or 4 other ones, but then after that, there's a drop off as it relates to precision. But then you kind of have to ask yourself, well, was this done on purpose? Like, were they going for a perfect circle? Because on a lot of them, underneath the handles, it's a smaller diameter than it is front to back. So if you're saying the handles are left and right, then that diameter from the width of the thing is thinner on almost all of them than the front and back is. So it's like, well, it wasn't turned on a lathe then, unless it was a wobbly lathe, and they weren't going for a circle. If you consistently see the same thing, like with the symmetry being different, then you consistently, just another example, you consistently see the handles being closer on one side than the other, and all these debunker people are saying like, oh, they didn't know what they were doing, they're not precise, they're not accurate, like because the handles aren't completely opposite of each other. That's not what they were going for. Like, it's clearly not what they were going for, because it's every one of the ones that I have offset handles. Even the most precise ones have offset handles, so it's absolutely not what the makers of these things were going for, to have them opposite each other.
Wow. There's like an intentional deviation from like symmetry in that regard. It's like, I mean, I have to admit, as an artist, I mean, I've made some sculptures and stuff like that. Nothing amazing, but I love working with wood, and I love the sort of organic feel of the handmade sculpture, as opposed to like using, saws and precision, getting these perfect cuts and everything. I mean, it's cool, but there's something about that organic look of being hand carved that's beautiful to me. Yeah. So that could be an explanation, but still, I mean, it's hard to imagine making one of these things. I mean, I almost want to try it, except I may not have time left in my life.
Yeah, you don't have 85 years left to make one of them. Yeah,
I started too late.
Right. Yeah. They would take a ridiculous amount of time to make by hand.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, and some of them you just can't make by hand. I mean, some of them are just too precise to make by hand. It's just impossible. Like you couldn't. It doesn't matter how many lifetimes you have. You're not getting, because you wouldn't have had the instruments necessary to measure down to the fraction of a millimeter. A hundredth of a 4,000ths of an inch. You need instrumentation. You can't just eyeball that. You can't just you can't just see that. That has to be, so. Some of them couldn't have been made by hand. So they're interesting. I saw the video that you guys did with Ben Van Kerkwijk on them, and it was definitely good. You guys were talking about a couple of the ones in the other room.
Yes.
On that episode. So that was cool.
This is Kyle and I walking. We're underneath the step pyramid now, going to the place where most of these vases were found.
Right.
And it's crazy, the tunnels you have to explore, and then of course the parts where the vases actually were, and there's still thousands of fragments of them all over in the sand, in the dirt, or whatever. They won't let you record, so I don't have that actual level. Okay. But below this level we're in here, there's another level, and down in that level, when you're down there, there's another level below that they haven't fully dug out yet, so you can't even go down in there yet. So we still don't even know.
Right.
What's in these tunnels? What might, and there's a couple of beautiful alabaster boxes down in there too. They're translucent. They probably were not. I don't know if they're precise. They look like they could have been done by hand. Alabaster is soft. Like they're still gorgeous, and somebody took the time to drag them down into these tunnels beneath this thing.
Like boxes, like Serapeum, like boxes.
Yes,
Serapeum?
they're small.
Not that
they're
size,
small, right?
Yes.
And of course, I asked Yusuf. I was like, "Well, what were these for?" They're tiny, and he was like, "Well, they'll tell you they were for children." But no one knows, and there were no bodies in them as far as I know. These boxes are just sort of shoved into a tight tunnel. Yeah. There's two of them sitting there. But the place has been looted in antiquity, and I mean, to the point where people stole most of the lapis tiles off of the walls for the for the first parts of the tunnels that lead into the big chamber. There were beautiful blue lapis lazuli tiles all over, and they were almost all gone. Okay. So everything was looted, which is interesting because the vases were still down there, which this is the other thing. We talk about this a lot, that when there's nothing found in the pyramid, they're like, well, it was looted in antiquity. I'm like, yes, but looters want gold, they want jewelry, they want precious stones. Yeah, they don't take body parts and grave, grave wrappings and. If there's vases and containers, they break them to see what's inside them, and they leave the shards of the pottery and take the contents if they want it. But an actual tomb that's been looted is trashed. Yeah, it's not clean. Right, it hasn't been cleaned out. Right, so when you go in some of these places and you're like, it's just empty. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, obviously people have been cleaning it out. Archaeology goes in there and cleans it out, but it's interesting because
if they had found grave goods in the king's chamber, they'd be on display.
They're empty.
Right. Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say about going under the step pyramid, there's a vase, a piece of one down there. I mean, it's so big, it's hard to even roll it over to look at it. It's just a broken shard, and you can see part of the lip and like maybe a chunk of lug handle, but it's probably 3 or 4 inches thick. Wow. And you're just like, trying to turn this thing over to, I mean, it would have been very difficult to get that down there in the first place whole.
How big would it have been?
I mean, I'm thinking probably like this big around maybe, but looked like one of those ones that you have, this sort of short, squat ones.
Granite maybe? Or
granite.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Is it the diorite?
What I think may be a preform. It's just a granite ball about this big.
Okay.
That's got somewhat of one area that's a little bit flattened. Huh. Like it looked like you're going to make a vase out of this. Solid granite. Just laying in there amongst the shards of other vases. And so that makes me question like the idea that the people that built the pyramid and dug the tunnels made the vases. Why would they take a preform down there?
Right.
And that is, I think, maybe a pretty good piece of evidence that these were collected by later people. Yeah. And so, like I collect arrowheads, when I'm walking through the woods and looking for arrowheads, and I find a preformed piece of flint that somebody had, they'd gotten the outer cortex off and they're going to work this, I keep that too.
Mm-hmm.
That's an artifact.
Mm-hmm.
So I that's what I'm thinking. Like, are they making vases down in these tunnels? I doubt it.
Yeah, probably not. I was thinking about that too, but I mean, you would think that you would find more than just one, ball that was about to be a vase if they were
making them. There'd be a whole bunch of them getting ready, right? Yeah, that's exactly, because when you go to a manufacturing site, say of flint arrowheads, projectile points and stuff, you are going to find a lot of preforms there.
Yeah, and
you can see
flakes everywhere.
They've got big chunks of flint, and depending on what type of stone they're making arrowheads out of. In our area, it's flint. There's big chunks of it, and you can see like a big flake taken off of this big chunk.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bunch of those. They collected them. They're not naturally occurring right there in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
They may be up on the ridge, on the hill, a mile away, or wherever.
Yeah.
But they definitely collected them there, so you would find a lot of preforms.
Yeah.
So that would be an interesting thing to look for in Egypt if you were, inclined to maybe look for new discoveries. Is find a place where there's a bunch of giant granite balls.
Right.
They were making these vases out
pounding
of.
stones.
Pounding stones. Right. Yeah.
There are a bunch of these diorite balls in the in the quarry.
The dolerite, is that what those are?
Dolerite,
The green ones?
okay,
Yeah.
terrible. It's
So the story is that Dozier buried himself at the Step Pyramid, and he collected all of these stone vases from all over Egypt, and that 40,000 of them or so, I guess, is the number that people always mention, right? But 30,000, 50,000, whatever it was, but that he buried himself with all of these stone vases, and that you don't really see them after that. I mean, I've heard conflicting stories about all of this whole, the whole thing. I don't know that anybody really has, like, this is another one of those things that, like, I don't know that we really have like the full picture of exactly what happened, and were they still being made after he buried himself with them, in Egypt, or did the production of them stop after he collected all of them? Because clearly, if the production of them stopped after he was buried, at the Step Pyramid of Saqqara, that would argue for, okay, these are obviously inherited because the Egyptian people didn't have the capability to work in, I mean, that it would make the argument that much more credible on the side of that these are significantly ancient from a prior civilization if you stop seeing them being created after Dozier's time. Yeah, I guess is what I'm saying. But I don't know. My understanding of that story is not. It's not complete, I guess. So I was just curious what you guys thought about that.
I think you're right that no one's understanding of that story is complete.
Yeah,
because you're right. It is conflicting, and you go to we go to museums and you see vases with younger dates, and that they were making them this way, and then you're also told, well, they stopped making them after this point, or is it that the difficult stone ones were stopped being? Those were the ones that no one made after that, and after that it was easier. But you also see, and I know you've probably seen Ben talk about this, where they've got this beautiful stone vase, and right next to it is a piece of pottery with markings on it to try to make it look similar. Yeah. And you wonder, like, this is the same people making this, it's the same time. Now that's not completely out of the question. Yeah. Right. I mean, you can go and buy a very expensive, beautiful, lathed vase, and you can also go buy a cheap pottery one from Walmart or whatever, and the same culture made it roughly at the same time. But I don't know. Yeah, why did Djoser decide that he needed 40,000 vases down there? Right. Yeah. That's the next question, where he's like, I want another set of tunnels below this one. Yeah. And you need to fill it with all the bases. Right. All of them. Yeah.
I mean, if you, I would love to have 40,000 arrowheads. I'm a collector. I go and look for them, these artifacts. Yeah. That's kind of the way I think of it. Yeah.
But if you demand to be buried with your arrowheads, I'm gonna be like, no, those are mine. Yeah. And then those are going to belong to your son. You don't get to just take them back into the ground with you.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, it's good that he did because we might not have them today.
That's
true. If
yeah.
they weren't underground for 5,000 years, they might be all in pieces all over the world, right now.
That's true.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's interesting. I mean, for the certificates of authenticity for the ones that I have, they do all say, they're all basically 2700 BC or before. You don't see any of them that come after that time period, so which does, it does argue that, okay, they weren't really made, that Ben's, theory on that is the right one, that they weren't really made after that period. And, I'm not just buying the old ones. Like I'm trying to get my hands on it as this in 2023. That was my mission, man. Get my hands on as many of these things as possible. So I'm going to spend 2024 trying to learn as much as possible about them and, get some information out there and try to find similarities. You were looking at the resonance earlier. Yes. That was super, super cool. We got to talk about that a little bit, but
for example, we went to, where is the it's slipping my mind, the place where the labyrinth is supposed to be? Is that Hawara?
Oh man, don't ask me about names. I'm terrible with these names.
Well, anyway, it slipped my mind, but we went to this place where the labyrinth is supposed to be, the underground labyrinth, and there is a pyramid structure there. It's mud brick, but it's got a core of giant limestone blocks that are kind of sticking out of the mud bricks that have been melting, and then the canal goes right through. And walking around this pyramid to look at it and the canal and sort of thinking about the possibility that we're standing on top of this legendary labyrinth, you're crunching around on piles and piles and piles of pot shards, and there's just millions of them. Yeah. How many of them may be little stone fragments instead of pottery fragments? You would have to go through them one by one to find out, but somebody has just piled them all up there, and it's like a whole acre of piles of pottery shards. Who knows crazy. If there's pieces of stone vases in there, right have you heard this idea? Ben has talked about it a little bit, that there may have been a underground labyrinth.
Okay.
And Petrie so Petrie went to look for it, and he dug down in this area, and he found basically a stone slab or a series of stone slabs, like big tiles. And he thought, well, it's gone. This was the foundation. But other people later think, no, he was standing on the roof because it's underground. And that was the roof part.
Yeah, it is Hawara.
Yeah, Hawara. Yeah. Okay. So then people went and more recently, they went and did a scanning project out here. They took a GPR back and forth over this area, and they got very interesting readings that imply that there is, voids under the ground here.
And they had dug canals nearby,
full water,
and they ran into some giant chunks of granite columns blocks. And stuff.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So if you read, was it Herodotus that said he went there, or I think it might have been Herodotus, but it's one of the guys who wrote a bunch of history where people are like, well, I believe him here because he says what I already thought was true, but I don't believe him here because he's telling me stuff I don't believe is true. It's one of those guys where he is the source for the reason this happened until he isn't.
Right.
And that's whenever he's saying something that doesn't agree with the already established history. But anyway, he talked about the labyrinth, and that when you were taken into it, you had to have a guide, because there were so many rooms connected by all these different hallways and filled with treasure, and with the treasure of knowledge, books. It was like a big library, and that he wasn't allowed to go to the second level down, because that's where he said something about the ancient kings were buried there, is what he said. The crocodile kings, whatever that means.
Yeah, okay. Crocodile kings.
All right.
And you start thinking, well, who are the crocodile kings?
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, you could understand if below the level below had a bunch of like ancestral burials, that maybe they would say, well, you can't go down here. But up above that is a library, basically, but you need a guide, because it's very confusing. Okay. I've been in libraries that are like that. You can get lost. Yeah. So. But yeah, it's a fascinating idea.
Yeah, for sure.
And walking around on the surface where it's supposed to be is piles and piles of pottery shards.
Yeah. Yeah, the
Yep, that's
labyrinth
it right
thing,
there.
the underground tunnel thing. I mean, people will probably listen and being like, if that was there, we'd probably know about it. But it's like, I mean, would we? It's like the underground tunnels in Turkey. That.
Oh
that
yeah,
was-
Darren Q.
Yeah, Darren Q. Yeah,
that whole area.
Yeah, like that was just found what, like 20 years ago or something.
And
Yeah,
they're still
Am I-
finding
They
more.
keep finding them. It's
You're
all,
right.
and it's the same story. Some guy near the town was digging,
Yep.
adding to his basement by
Yep.
expanding it, and breaks into a tunnel. And then
Right.
there's an entire city that no one knew was down there, and
Right.
it goes down 12 levels and connects to the other ones by a big
Yeah.
roadway.
Yeah,
Tunnel goes
yeah,
underneath
yeah,
for
yeah.
miles and connects
It's
to
like
another
connected to aquifers
Yeah.
underground, and it's like, people
It's
like
wild.
20,000 people could live in this
Yes.
city, and
Yes.
it's like just because some random guy just dug a hole in his basement and just
Right.
like found this, and it's like we have no idea. Like, and we always,
Yeah.
it's again, it goes back to that conversation. We think we're at the pinnacle of knowing everything, and,
Right.
and something like that happens, and we discover that we really don't know much.
I'm so jealous of these guys, And whenever I read stories like that, and the guy's like, "Wait, you were digging in your basement and you found a giant underground city?"
A lost city.
Right? Yeah.
I want to be that guy.
Yeah, I know.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
But the other thing that brings up is, and like this may slightly tie into the UFO topic or these ideas, is that how many of those could be out there that are occupied,
yeah, it could be. Yeah.
and you just don't know. Like you could live right on top of them, and there
Yeah.
could be a whole underground city, and people live down there.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe somebody would find out because we got seismic sensors, and people would be like, "What is all this noise
yeah.
coming from this area over here that seems to be, around a mile underground?"
Oh, don't worry about that. It's just natural processes. Yeah.
There's a river there underground or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of some of that underground stuff, like, do you guys have thoughts on like when? I mean, that's the thing for some of those underground cities is like, and you find them again, Egypt, you find them Turkey, like kind of in a lot of places around the world, is like when were they made and why?
Yeah.
And so I think back to, for me, like I go back to younger Dryas with like, a time where there was so much change above ground, and we don't know what the living conditions would have been like above ground. Like what could have killed off 70% of the megafauna all over the world. You know? Like what type of an environment? If it was a meteor, if the sun was blocked out, if the plant life all died, if the radiation was extreme, if any of those things happen, you're going to want to dig underground. Like you're going to want to live underground, and you're going to want to be in, you would have whatever city that you had above ground, whatever group of people, if you survived, that would be the people that dug underground. And, you think about a city with 20,000 people living underground all of a sudden, like that makes sense, and like you're going to dig until you find water, and you're going to create all these rooms and these, these bedrooms for people to sleep in and live in until the earth above the ground got back to something that was livable, where you could go outside and hunt for food and, plant, whatever you need, crops to to live off of.
And how are they seeing down there? This is always thing that just gets me. It's like you got these tiny tunnel systems going all around, way down there. Are they burning torches?
Right.
And then like that's eating up the oxygen. Like this is this. I know they had vents and stuff that went to the surface, but still, it's just wild to me to think how you would live down there. But I do the same thing. That basically what you're saying is like, when I hear that there's a gigantic underground city, I think this is a bunker in an attempt by a civilization to survive.
Right.
Something.
Exactly. Right. And so when they say, the mainstream, when the story is always, it's about 5,000 years old, it's about 4,000 years old. It's the date they put on everything. Everything.
When they don't know, that's how you can tell.
Right, because because we were hunter gatherers before that. We couldn't have built this before that. Well, now obviously the definition for hunter gatherers changed with Göbekli Tepe. Thank goodness, it's about time. But it's like okay, so do we need to go back and look at some of this other stuff, some of these ancient cities, some of these underground cities, and really like think about, okay, well, if they were making Göbekli Tepe back then, potentially making the Sphinx back then, obviously we could have
making the vases back then.
Could have been making the vases back then. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So that kind of, everything, Graham Hancock's shirt on Joe Rogan when he came out, everything keeps getting older.
Stuff just keeps on getting older.
Stuff just keeps getting older. It really does. So, I was just curious your guys' thoughts on the underground cities.
There's
Well, okay, hold on.
Go ahead.
One thing I like to say about this kind of stuff is, because you were talking about like this is how you get away, but like there's two interesting points about this. Number one, in the stories of the destruction, people are getting forewarned. There's always there's plenty of destruction stories, flood, whatever. But there's always this hint of like somebody is telling them like this is about to happen and you need to prepare.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always two things. It's either you need to get away, float or climb above the water, or you need to go underground to survive the cold or the fire, right? So how do you know which one to do?
Yeah.
And so like, these people in Anatolia, the Cappadocia area where Daring QU is and all that, they clearly went underground.
Yep.
You don't want to do that if there's going to be a flood.
Right.
That's what you do when the surface is going to be too hot or too cold or something like that. But if there's going to be a ton of water, digging a bunch of tunnels underground is a bad idea.
You're not going to want to be underground.
Yeah. So it's really, and then you don't want to build a boat if you're about to get fire on the surface, right? Your boat's just going to burn and you're going to die. So it's interesting that there's a hint of forewarning, and then also the forewarning knows
which one to do,
because like in the Zoroastrian tradition,
that's what I was going to bring up.
Zendavesta is telling them to Ahura Mazda, the god, the one that they show with the winged disc. He's standing in it. Have you seen these? Yeah. That's Ahura Mazda. He's basically saying, build a vara. A vara is an underground, like a bunker, and you're going to pick people very carefully to bring down in there. You're going to pick animals very carefully. You don't want them to have any disfigurements because you have to stay down there a long time.
And there's a bunch of rules about how to deal with dead bodies and all of this stuff to remain healthy and not poison the water and all that. It's like it's all into this text, this very ancient text.
Yeah.
So it's
see, he's got the winged.
Right.
He's usually shown standing in a winged disc with feet on it. It's very interesting depictions. And then he's telling, was it Yima? Fair Yima.
Yeah.
Build a vara to save our people, right? And then there's this hint that he's giving him a little bit of technology, like don't worry about lighting the place. I'll give you a special window or something that will provide light. And it's just, I don't know.
Yep.
But this is the idea is like, are these varas?
Yeah.
Is that what we're looking at?
Right.
And they may have been built in a hurry.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, like with the flood, also, the traditional, the Utnapishtim or Noah story, you don't have a lot of time. Like, don't go cut trees. Like, tear your house down to build this boat. You need to be in a hurry. And then you need to provide it with all that you need to have enough animals. And it's like, what kind of animals is he bringing? You can't bring everything on the boat, but maybe what he needed was the seeds for agriculture. So what you're looking at is cows, goats, sheep, the stuff that humans use. And then you're just going to let the rest of the animals take care of themselves or not. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, I love these hints in the myths that cataclysms have taken place. Humans have managed to survive them, and somebody was warning them that they were about to happen.
Yeah.
And the idea of the person warning them also could be the learned people. Like, we know they were doing astronomy. They're all watching this stuff. They're looking out and wondering what's going on out there, just like we are. And so, some people being technologically advanced in that regard may have had forewarning of something coming.
Yeah.
And gone and warned other societies that maybe didn't have that type of technology. So I mean, Russ is knows a lot more about the UFO stuff than I do, but I think we don't need that to explain what's going on in terms of like building pyramids or digging all this stuff. Like we have side by side
the coexistence of vastly different development levels. We have it now.
Yeah, for sure.
So and you can imagine if there's a destruction that some people that might survive from the high technology civilization might flee to the low technology one, because those people know how to live in.
They can survive.
Yeah. And then some of the people that show up there may like integrate. They'll be more Viracocha style, where they're like, well, I'll give you gifts of some of the things that I know that might help you out. But meanwhile, you can help me stay alive. And then other places, they might try to be a tyranny, a tyrannical king, because they're like, I have technology, I have a gun, whatever.
Right.
You can't stop me. I'm powerful.
Yeah.
So is that what happened?
Yeah.
Or are these, and we call them lowercase g gods, right? Because that's what you see throughout the myths. It's like they're gods, but I don't think they're talking about a person who was supposed to have created the whole universe. This is something else, right? So the lowercase g gods.
That's funny.
And are you a good lowercase g god or a bad lowercase g god?
Right. So you guys did some amazing work on Göbekli Tepe, and so for people that don't know, the Göbekli Tepe site is now dated to what, 11,600 years old. The carbon dating from the material between the stones, is that about right?
That sounds right.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact dates on that, but they did get they get date ranges.
Yeah.
We
That doesn't
find the accuracy of
that doesn't mean that that's how old it is. That means that's really the minimum date for when those rocks were added. The T-pillars themselves could be significantly older than that. Yeah.
We know the T-pillars were there before the rock walls, because the rock walls literally butt up against the T-pillars.
Okay, right.
And in some case surround them on three sides. So you don't build that rock wall and then try to shove your T-pillar in there.
Right. Yeah, so Göbekli Tepe, for those people that don't know on the show, do you guys want to explain what it is, and then kind of give your thoughts on? I mean, it basically backed up the whole humans were hunter gatherers prior to 6,000 years ago. We essentially just redefined what it means to be a hunter gatherer, and
exactly.
Yes,
because there were no ancient there was no ancient structures that are this sophisticated that had ever been found. We were just hunter gatherers, and there's nothing that's older than this, and that's why the pyramids are 4,500 years old. And that's why everything is 4,500. Because we weren't civilized prior to that. But then this Göbekli Tepe changes that, obviously,
right?
And it is civilization. I mean, it is. It would take a very sophisticated group of people working on this site to create this thing. You're talking 20-ton. Pillars, 40,000 pound stones with carvings on them that are. I'll let you guys kind of kick this one off, but this one I think is one of the more interesting things that's being excavated and discovered out there right now.
And Göbekli Tepe is not the only site. Like, this is one site of many sites in that area,
right?
That are just like it.
It may be 10 or 12. It may be as many as 40. We've heard multiple different things.
Karahan Tepe is another one
that's another one they're doing a lot of work on.
And
they
know that one already. They already have older dates for that one.
Yeah, 500 years older.
Okay.
So it's kind of confusing when you get into the dating of this site. It's really hard to give a short synopsis of how they arrived at these dates, but they can't date the stone directly,
right?
I mean, they can, but it doesn't really provide the type of dating we need for archaeology, and it doesn't tell you when it was moved or when it was erected. Now, they have one method where they can date this sort of deposits that happen on limestone after limestone is buried in dirt or soil. You bury a piece of limestone and deposits start to build up on the stone. And then you can date that fairly roughly. Yeah, you can date that process of growth of this deposit. However, that didn't really supply adequate dates, because all that would tell you, if you could get it very accurate, is when it was buried. Right? But it could have been buried, uncovered, and then buried again. So it doesn't really give you an age. So they were not able to directly date the architecture. What they could date in a roundabout way was the lithic styles, the types of stone points that were being made. And they had already had established dates for those, which is immediately when the archaeologists found those at the bottom layers, they were like, okay, this is like 12,000 years old. Because there's a date range for those types of points. Now, they needed to back that up with carbon dating or some type of actual scientific dating that wasn't relative dating, because this is sort of relative to the points that we find. We can say the site is this old. They got some carbon dates from some loam and stuff that was in the mortar at the very bottom of some of the rock walls, and that kind of backed up the already assumed date based on the lithics because it was basically the same time. So it's at least you can say that people were there occupying the site after it was constructed around 12,000 years ago. So it doesn't tell you, and that may tell you the age of the rock walls that were built, but not the megalithic architecture, not because the rock walls are clearly added after the bedrock was flattened and the pillars were stood up.
Okay.
So, and again, it's like we're going to learn more. I could be wrong about some. I assume that these rock walls are not part of the original design of the building.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I could be wrong about that. There may be more evidence that comes out that shows that, well, no, this is actually a part of the design, which was to stand up a bunch of megalithic stones and then build these rudimentary rock walls between them and cover up the carvings you just made on the megaliths. It just, I mean, it doesn't seem to make sense as a building design.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you look here, you can see some of the pillars are embedded in these rough cobble rock walls.
Right.
And some of these smaller pillars have beautiful artwork on them, and the rock walls completely cover it up. And that doesn't really make sense unless somebody came along later and was trying to sort of restore the site.
Yeah. Now, the thing that happened, and it's understandable that this happens with the archaeology, when they were trying to get dates and they're trying to figure out how old this site was, they look at things like the stratigraphy of the dirt that they're digging out, right? Well, they notice that the stratigraphy or the infill inside these enclosures is inverted in some cases. It's mixed up because they can tell based on the types of arrowheads, because they have already pre-established that from all over the place. All the sites that they found where they're finding arrowheads, they have carbon dates that roughly put these styles of arrowheads at certain time periods. So when they're going through the infill, they're seeing these layers are inverted. So it looks like people were throwing that material in. And that kind of, I think, with some other factors, led to the idea that this place was intentionally buried.
Right.
And now I think that the evidence as well as the narrative in the scientific community is starting to shift away from that.
Right.
And they're going to be saying pretty soon that, like, no, these were not intentionally buried, that these were actually collapses of material into the enclosures.
I can't wait till they say that this was a flood. I can't wait.
Now that's another. Yes. So this site, Göbekli Tepe, is at the highest, one of the highest points
It's on top of a hill.
no doubt.
This sort of, I mean, we call it a mountain range, but really it's limestone hills that have been eroded away.
Yeah.
So it's this is one of the highest mountains there, but rain could definitely cause these collapses. I mean, it's happening today. They're trying to prevent it from happening. They got sandbags piled up everywhere. They're trying to keep the midden from collapsing into these enclosures. And you can tell the guys are out there cleaning it, because when they get hard rain, it definitely comes in.
Yeah.
And they know from the excavations that there were multiple stages of burial.
Okay.
So the thing that bothers me about the narrative is that it's kind of made out to be like these people built this thing, and then when they were done using it, they're like, now let's bury it. That's definitely not what happened.
Right.
And they were buried over a period of thousands of years. And I think by natural processes. Now,
You could do it by natural processes here. Then,
you can also show it's not just like a cut and dry thing, like that let's say that there was an infill of a few feet of sediment from a flood that went in and now covered the bottom couple of feet of the pillars. Well, people would come back, they'd still occupy the site, and they start depositing their debitage and everything from being there for a while. And then another one happens and more stuff collapses in. And so they slowly fill up over time. Well, the really interesting thing to me about the place is that they're finding that other ancient people came and excavated them also.
Oh, okay.
They dug down in these enclosures, and now there's at least two sites where this is obvious. One is enclosure C, where it is said in the papers that someone roughly 6 to 8,000 years ago came and intentionally dug pits directly down to the two central pillars in enclosure C and destroyed them.
Wow.
So it was like, I don't know. This just gets my brain going.
Yeah.
I'm just like, wow. Like, did they hear in their own legends that there was this place of power, and it was like, go up on the hill and dig it up, dig up the magical circle and destroy it.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting. In the cat enclosure, which we have never been into, I don't think it's open to the public yet. But the cat enclosure, I can't remember what enclosure letter it is. H maybe. They found evidence that a ramp was preserved in the sediment. So somebody had excavated that themselves, a ramp on which to walk down to get down into the inside of it.
Okay.
And I think those central pillars were also destroyed. Now, were they destroyed because they just fell over because they dug it up? That could be a possibility.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but the way it's described in the papers is that they were intentionally destroyed.
Yeah.
You have multiple events, multiple things happening at this site, and thousands of years of occupation by people. And so there's going to be a lot more that we have to learn.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
So many more to dig up. So
yeah, that's why it's so tough to look at all of these sites, because again, it's for all of them, it's thousands of years of occupation, and thousands of years of reuse. And it's like, even like the land we're living on today, it's like, it's been lived on before. Like we're not the first people.
Absolutely.
So. Yeah, and the other crazy thing about this, obviously, for people that might not know, is that the way that the pillars were carved was like it wasn't as if these animals and all these things on these pillars were carved into the pillars.
Yeah.
They actually removed the stone from the outside to create the pictures that you see, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's like a raised relief, in some cases high relief. But yeah, they're removing the material around what they want to show you, as opposed to cutting the image in.
Way more difficult.
Yeah.
Mastery of stonework.
And the other thing that's kind of part of that is that, the people at the quarry need to know that they need to know how much excess stone to leave on there so that you can carve something. There's this one carving of a cat or what do they think it is? It's like
I thought it was a cat.
Okay.
Is it not a cat?
It's literally sticking off of the edge of the pillar by like a foot or something.
I've seen that thing, yeah.
And so the guy in the quarry that was cutting it had to know to leave this big chunk there for the artist.
Yeah.
Now that piece is amazing.
It's a piece of sculpture stuck to the side of the
right.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And where do these stones come from? Do we know?
They're also made of limestone, and they come from nearby.
Okay.
They know where there's at least some stones still left in the quarry.
Okay.
Where they were cutting them out.
Okay.
And in Karahan Tepe, there's one on the backside of the hill. Karahan is sort of on a hill, but also goes through a saddle between two hills.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the backside of this one hill, there's a humongous T-pillar, like half cut out of the rock still left.
We got to walk around it, and there's supposedly a quarry for Göbekli Tepe itself near the site, but we couldn't get in there last time we were there. We're gonna try.
Gotcha.
Love to get into some of the quarries and look, but
and they say that they did all this stone cutting with flint.
Okay.
The flint
chisels.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guy that we
can do it with limestone.
But
you
can do it.
It's harder with granite, but
yeah. But the question goes back to like who built it and why, and
right.
So that I wanted to say you guys were talking about the flooding and filling it in and everything, and you have to remember that somebody first came along to this hill and they cut down, they sort of cleared down to the bedrock and then flattened out these circles, made these rock cut platforms, leaving the little pedestals that the central pillars are in. So that was the first thing they did. And then there would be, because it's close to the top of the hill, the only reason there was stuff to fall in is because there's this enormous midden mound around the entire site.
Right.
And I mean, it's a huge mound. Like that's
incredible. It's just,
I can show
mind blowing
in the beginning
how big this midden is.
The video we have here, it's looking at the midden around this. Well, here this actually shot. This is showing you this right here is a platform that doesn't have any pillars in it, right? This would have been one of the pedestals.
This would have been like an enclosure.
Yeah, this would have been one of the enclosures. It's just empty, and it kind of sits out by itself, off away from the main site. But then you see all these sort of strange cut marks in the rock here.
Right. Tube drills.
Yeah, somebody's tube drilling. And then there's these two big holes that, you know, are full of water when we were there. And it's like, were these intentional as well? Like, are they making water sources, little pools?
There were some holes like that at Karahan too.
Yes, there are at Karahan. Let's see if we can move forward here and look at, oops, let me skip that. I just want to show you the walking up to the main midden mound. Here it is. So this entire hill on the left here is the midden.
Okay.
And I mean, it goes all the way out into the back. You know, it's so huge that Karahan is awesome as well. When you're looking at because you can climb, when you get up to the top of the hill, you can look down and you just see it spilling all down, and you can see T-pillars just sticking out of the tops of this in these circular patterns all down there.
That's crazy.
And it's also it's really interesting how I've looked at our footage from this trip and then most of the photographs and footage from any other time. And in all of those other pictures, it looks like a desert. But because we got there right after this enormous flood, everything was green and there was flowers on everything. So it completely does not normally look like this.
That's cool though.
Yeah, this is
it also made it stand out.
It did make it stand out.
It made the midden pile stand out because there's a lot of nutrients in that midden.
Okay.
It has a lot more soil. Look at the hill across the way. It's just bare bedrock sticking out.
Yeah.
So there's not very much grass, and then this hill is just this lush green color.
And so how much of it is excavated currently? It's like 5% or something of the...
It's something like
that.
It's not very much.
Yeah, it's not much.
Yeah. And the what is it? Is it Pillar 43 that's the super interesting one?
Pillar 43 has the vulture. It's the vulture stone.
Yeah.
What do you guys make of that?
I like
Martin
Sweatman's
Sweatman's stuff on it. Yeah.
Analysis of it. I mean, I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
This is kind of another thing about us is it's like we don't know what it's so hard to look at I mean, I'm looking at that animal that's carved on the side of the pillar and I'm like, oh, it's a cat. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not sure.
Right.
So I don't know what to make of it, but I have the sense that this is that it does have meaning.
Yeah.
That's really all I can say about it. I believe that it has meaning and it meant something to the people that made it.
Right.
And they had some kind of logical progression that would say, well, this pillar needs to have this on it. And here's the significance as to why. But I don't know that I'll ever find out what that was.
Yeah.
So you can see this. This is standard what this mound is made of. Piles of rubble, but it's obviously artificial. In other words, humans occupied this area. So lots of the stones are close to the same size. It's midden mound with some cobblestone walls mixed in. So
they used to say
was that midden there before the main megalithic constructions were made? In other words, did they dig down through that to make it, or did that build up afterwards? That's the main question.
It has to be. I just can't imagine it. It's got to be after.
Yeah.
You know, those people that are associated with the lithics are at the same time as the mortar at the bottom of the walls. So it's like,
and they would be building the walls because they're standing up these stones.
This is the thing that makes it complicated. Is that because you can only get, it must be at minimum this old. You can't actually get the age. So I don't know. It's
it's a crazy sight.
And you know, the other thing is we didn't get to go to the museums. We didn't get to see all of the amazing artifacts that they brought out of the site because of the flooding.
Yeah.
So we're looking forward to seeing that. But I'm sure we're going to learn so much more in the next few years.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
The stuff that's going to be coming out of Karahan. And I think it's important to kind of, that the record needs to be corrected because it's this idea of intentional burial kind of puts the idea into people's heads that it was some kind of ceremonial, like we're going to bury this as a time capsule.
all
We're sending a
ceremonial.
message to the future.
Everything's ceremonial.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. Go, yeah.
It's just, we make that joke all the time. It was a temple and it was for ceremony.
It was
Right,
for ceremonies.
Right. That's
yeah.
it. That's all you need to know. Yeah.
Because nothing that the ancient people did was logical.
Right. Yeah. Nothing had a function. It was all just ceremony. Ceremony religion. Yeah. Right. The moon, the hollow moon thing outside
Yeah.
is. So you
There,
guys,
yeah. I mean, there's plenty of anomalies on the moon. I'm sure if you're interested in that idea, the transient lunar phenomena. So, but there's this picture of the moon that it's this 4 billion year old steady state artifact. That it maybe it occasionally gets a new crater, but it all the craters that are on it are very ancient and it never changes. It doesn't have an atmosphere. It has no weather, right? So it's like this time capsule. But then you have TLP, the transient lunar phenomena,
Okay.
that people have been seeing, and there's some pretty good collections of these that where astronomers since the 1500s and just all the way back to Galileo have been seeing stuff on the moon, like little lights, strange moving clouds. Now a lot of times you have to understand, like, what were they looking, what lenses were they using, what was their telescope like, was there anything in the atmosphere between them and the moon, all this kind of stuff. But a lot of times it's just like, nope, somebody was seeing something strange, or craters themselves seem to not always be the same, and then there's shadows that move across it. Like all this stuff is collected in this TLP like archive. In other words, like stuff that is not. In other words, where the moon isn't just a static object that never changes.
Yeah.
Shadows moving across, things appearing and disappearing, lights, little glowing clouds.
Right.
Indications of activity. It doesn't have to be aliens or whatever. It could be internal geological processes doing stuff, like something under a crater could be outgassing, and it leaves this sort of cloud over the crater that has to dissipate into the vacuum, or maybe it crystallizes onto the edge of the crater and leaves a sort of splash mark, and then people see that for a while before it completely sublimates away.
Yeah. Yeah, what are some of the strangest things about the moon? I mean, that make us question, like, what's going on here? Like, I mean, so the craters are all basically the same depth, right? So no matter how big an object is that comes smashing into the moon, and
it doesn't get deep enough.
It doesn't get deeper. It doesn't get deeper than whatever the maximum crater. They're all
like 3 kilometers or something like that.
Yeah,
2 or 3 kilometers.
They're all basically the same.
Yeah,
which is odd.
And then the front face versus the backside are so drastically different in aspect, and so you like the front is a very, like, everyone recognizes it. It's sort of iconic. It has these huge, the seas, these dark areas that are like lava flows. Okay. And it's like, what caused that a long time ago? And then they froze that way. But then the backside is very mountainous. Okay. It looks very different. And then, the craters. Some of the experiments they did, like we were mentioning earlier in the break, like that it rang for a long time, like a bell.
Right.
So what explains that?
Right. Yeah. It was ringing. And when did we measure that? In like the 70s or something? Or
I think, didn't they?
They dropped something on it.
Yeah, they dropped they dropped. I think they dropped the engine that they used to take off. Yeah. And then it goes down and boom, hits it, and the whole moon, because they had left seismic recorders there, and it just kept ringing, and it kept going and kept going.
Completely unexpected. Yeah, and it's like, but then we come up with the reason why afterwards, and it's like, let's just fit this into something that's not going to,
right. It's not. This is totally normal. Nothing to see here. We didn't expect it, but when it happened, it's actually not surprising because we're thinking around. We're trying to figure out a way to make it not surprising.
Right. Yeah. Pretty much.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. And then you were mentioning the size of the moon in general.
Well, so the size is interesting. There's all kinds of strange sacred numbers wrapped up in it, but also its position.
Yes.
So this has to do in part with its size, but it has this orbit that around the Earth that like it was parked. That it was put there on purpose. Because, like, what are the odds that it's in this place where it perfectly occults the sun? It isn't much larger than the sun when it occults it. It isn't much smaller
Right.
From our perspective, on the surface of the Earth,
Yeah.
it appears to be the exact same size
Right.
as the sun. And so when there's an eclipse, it's a perfect occultation
Right.
sometimes.
Right.
Like this eclipse that's coming up is going to be a perfect occultation of the sun. The one that happened the year before was the annular, where you see a ring, right? So the moon is a little bit farther away from us, so it doesn't completely cover the sun.
Right.
But sometimes it's a perfect eclipse, and then that allows you to see the corona, this all this stuff around the sun that you can never see with the naked eye without this device. This gigantic space device.
Yeah.
It's like an observational tool.
Yeah.
And really, it's just like, what are the odds,
Right.
that's what we would have?
Right.
It's, again, you have all these weird odds. It's like, what are the odds that life will exist? What are the odds that intelligent life will exist? And intelligent life that we've found just so happens to be on this place with this moon that doesn't look like any of the other moons that we see anywhere.
Nothing.
That happens to be perfectly sized and at the right distance to do that, to blow all of our minds occasionally.
Right.
Yeah, and you could say our moon's too big, and then people were like, well, there are other moons in the solar system that are as large or maybe a little larger than our moon, but those planets that they're around are enormous. Our moon, like the size ratio between the Earth and the moon there's nothing like that anywhere else in the solar system. Mars has a couple of moons. They're little potatoes. They're not even big enough. They don't have enough mass to make themselves spherical.
Right. And that speaks to the density of the moon being extremely light, right? Which speaks to the theory about it potentially being hollow, I guess, right?
Yes, the overall density. Yeah. But then the shallowness of the craters speaks to a very
hard shell.
Yeah. So
Right.
you maybe have a high density, very strong shell, and then the rest of it's hollow.
Yeah, right. And
Leading to an overall low density.
which could explain the ringing,
Yes.
and everything else.
Yeah.
And wasn't there some study done that talked about the rocks on the moon being much older near the surface and much younger as you dug down lower? Or is that's something that I have?
I haven't heard that. That's
Okay.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have things like the Blair cuspids, like where then this is all based on, photos from above, like lunar orbital camera or the Apollo orbits, and they're taking pictures looking down. But you're basically looking straight down on a surface, and you're looking at shadows, and you're looking at objects casting the shadows, And sometimes you see this very small object, and it casts this incredibly long shadow.
Right.
But everything else around it is casting normal length shadows. And so you're like, well, maybe this is a very tall, narrow object, but that doesn't seem like something you would normally get.
Right.
And so there's a series of these, and they also appear to be they're not just randomly placed. And so people start thinking they're obelisks and they're up on the moon, and I don't know what they are, but there's some interesting stuff like that.
Right.
And there's also trails. There are tracks on the moon.
Right.
And
Yeah, can you pull those up, Ryan?
some of the times you can see that the track mark is made by it. At the end of it is a big rock. And so like this rock has rolled and it's left this track. But sometimes the tracks do not have an explanatory boulder.
Right. Right.
Yeah, there's some. That's a great picture of some
Yeah.
track marks. Yeah.
I did
And
not
you see
know
the
about
boulders
that.
on most of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is that lake? Or there's this old lake bed where the rocks do this?
Oh, racetrack playa.
Right,
It's
in
like
California.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But apparently there's a good reason for that.
There has been an explanation that I really like at this
Yeah,
point, that it
yeah.
makes ice sails, and it's
Right.
really cool.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But ice sails doesn't seem to be a good explanation for the moon.
Right.
But yeah, the tracks are interesting, and then there's also another one that you can look at and just wonder about. There may be a perfectly good natural explanations for some of this stuff, but the splash marks that go out from some of the craters, some of these you can see with the naked eye without any assistance. Like Tycho has a lot of very bright lines that go out from the crater, and they cross a large portion of the moon. So you imagine something impacting the moon, and there's going to be ejecta, an ejecta pattern. But what's weird about some of the splash lines that come out of these craters is they're not really all radial. they cross each other, you know, from the same. In other words, it doesn't look quite right. Was going very fast.
Very fast, and it still only went in 3 kilometers.
Right, it didn't make a deep
right,
hole. But
right.
yeah, you
Incredible.
can see the ejecta mark is
Right.
enormous.
For something that rings that's, you know, very low density, like why isn't it going in?
And look how
past the
the
surface.
see this picture. It's like all the way to the left, third one down. Yes, this one. See the lines, how far they go?
Yeah,
I mean, you're talking about crossing a third, maybe a half
right,
of the, you know, but crossing an entire hemisphere there.
right.
But they're not.
So what are those lines? Like, are those like from when it stretched out?
That's the
like,
question. But you can see how they're not quite a proper radial pattern. They don't all point at the middle of the crater,
right.
which is what you would expect. So it's still quite a mystery. Like, what are these lines?
Yeah.
Some people have, I mean, in the Who Built the Moon, he's, you know, the guy is like, when he starts to go off on all the craziness at the end of it, he's saying, you know, they're mining these things and these are machine tracks and the tracks would last a long time. So yeah, you see them on there forever, but it's the reason they're not always perfectly straight from the crater is because it's machines driving around them.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know what they are, but
Let's go to Mars. What do you guys think? Just real face on Mars. Any thoughts on that thing? Have you guys?
Man, I obsessed over that.
Did you?
I did. Yeah, and I was mad at the people that were just like, nah, look at it at a different time of day. It's
Yeah.
nothing. I'm like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
That's got to be a face.
Like, what's the quick story on that thing, just so people understand what we're talking about? Because my understanding of it is that it was like that NASA took this photo and released it, and it was like, okay, here's this photo of this
Viking.
Yeah.
It was one of the early
Yeah,
orbiters.
well,
Yeah,
yeah,
Viking
yeah,
1 or something.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And it's like, okay, there's this thing, but that's nothing to see. They didn't think it was going to be a big deal. People, you know, but then people got super crazy interested in it.
Yeah.
And, you know, what is this? And then NASA released this image of it that was like this total Photoshop hack job of like, you know, 13 layers of Photoshopping to show this thing as being like, you know, just a normal anomaly that happened
Whoa.
to get picked up by the light one time. Yeah, my understanding, right.
I didn't
I
know
think,
that.
yeah, they photoshopped the
Wait, are we bringing back the Mars face?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But I just want to know if there's anything to it. I really don't know. I mean, I've
Well,
seen very little
look,
on this.
I'm
but,
diving back in, boys.
but
Even
they haven't been back to it. And it's like,
right. Why don't you just land in Cydonia and take a look?
Right.
Yeah.
Just show us another picture.
Yeah.
Like, just go back and take a picture of it. Like, bring the freaking rover there. The rover's all over the planet, like
Yeah.
traveling everywhere,
It's like
all over
it's
the place.
circles
right.
it.
Not going to the
Exactly.
face.
Well, they don't go there.
Nope.
It's like, why? Why don't you just go there? Everybody wants to see it. Look at that. 1976, 1998. Look at the
Yeah.
difference and
Yeah.
what they made it look like.
2001.
Well, the 2001 actually still looks like a face.
Look, that's what I'm saying. Even if there was no photoshopping, whatever, and they're just showing you another picture and saying, well, here's what it really looks like,
Yeah.
it's still weird.
Right.
It's got this, it's in this flat plane, and this thing's just sticking out of it, and it's a very odd,
Right.
whatever it is, this feature is very strange. You should go check
you know
it
what
out.
we ought to do? We ought to get a picture of like the Black Pyramid. Isn't it called the Black Pyramid?
Which one?
It's
Oh,
the
on
mud
Mars
brick one.
or- in Egypt?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't look like a pyramid. Look at that.
Oh, yeah.
That's not a pyramid.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it actually is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mean because they collapse, they degrade.
Yeah, look
Yeah.
at that.
Yeah.
And so that it's just what occurred to me that like this, when you're looking at the border around the face on Mars, it's like, yeah, this is a
It's a
raised platform that's kind of squarish, and then it's got some eroded stuff on top.
Yeah.
yeah, and it's collapsing. It's very old.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right,
you know, there's other things too with Mars.
I'm
There's-
back on board, bro. You brought me back to the Mars face.
I want to
dude.
know,
Thank you.
like, why can't we get a real updated picture? Like, why won't they bring the rover back there? Like, what is going on with this thing? Because you know they Photoshop so. We know NASA, like that's proven. We know that they Photoshop like all of their photos before they show us anything, and so it's like, I mean, what like, it drives me crazy that we can't get a decent, you know, like an explanation for this thing and like get close to it. Like, drive the freaking rover into its eyeballs, you know, like
Yeah.
Yes.
like why not?
What about the pyramids? Weren't there supposed to be 5?
Right around
They were
it.
like 5-sided.
Right near it.
Yeah. In the Cydonia region. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so, that's what's interesting is, again,
There's one of them. Yeah.
I take it back to this guy Leonard who wrote Who Built the Moon. The way in the book he's describing, like, he's going to NASA. He's digging through their boxes of photographs, looking at stuff, and then taking those pictures and talking to the people at NASA, then going out and teaching kids, showing them pictures, getting them involved. Then the kids are writing letters to NASA, asking NASA, why haven't they given us an explanation for this weird thing that's in this crater?
Yeah.
And so then you start wondering, is it people like this that is the reason NASA started airbrushing and photoshopping all their pictures? Because they're like, we don't want to deal with this. We're just trying to land on the moon.
Right. Yeah, could be. Yeah, I don't know.
But it seems like, why would you not want to talk about this?
Right.
I've seen, this is another explanation that's been given, like, don't you think that if NASA was finding evidence of ancient artifacts up there that they would tell everybody because then they'd get all the funding they wanted?
Nope.
Yeah, well, clearly not.
Yeah, they don't even want to say, okay, everyone's interested in this. Let's drop the next probe nearby.
Right.
Yeah.
They just, that is weird.
Yeah. So it seems like they have some other incentive that's stronger than the incentive to get a lot of funding because people think there might be ancient alien artifacts
Keep
up there.
people calm.
Yeah.
That's the whole incentive.
You
There's
think so?
nothing to see here. Like,
Yeah.
there's nothing interesting happening anywhere in the entire galaxy. just don't worry about it and just keep working and pumping money into the economy. That's what NASA's like. That's the whole, the government, the whole NASA. That's what people do. Like, that's the whole system. It's like they don't want people to, to rise up and to think about things differently and to think about these topics and to explore, unknown. They want us to think that we're in this, that we understand everything, and that it's all under control.
That we're kind of in a static universe that doesn't change much, or if it does change, it's only over extremely long time spans, and so
we are the greatest change in the universe.
Yeah, and we're the pinnacle of everything right now.
Exactly.
And we have the manual for how the universe works, and it's the final edition.
Right. Exactly.
Man.
So
that's depressing.
Yeah. But yeah, that one's interesting. But yeah, what do you guys think on the UFO topic?
Well, I think this one is very muddy, right? It's murky.
Yeah.
We were just talking about the psychological, the psyops, the disinformation stuff. Like, clearly that's all involved in this.
Yeah.
But the phenomena is very old.
I'm interested in the topic, but it's one of those ones it's hard to study.
Yeah.
To discover anything about it. It seems the more I learn about it, the more confusing it gets.
The UFO topic in general?
Yes.
Yeah.
And how many phenomena is it really? That's the other thing is, like, is it multiple things that, because we know so little about this particular, like, maybe there probably are phenomena that we just don't have any grasp on. Some of them we have no idea that there could be anything behind this that could generate it. And so maybe those things result in a lot of different things and they get all kind of lumped together. So is it possible that everything paranormal, the ghosts, the strange feelings, the people who have precognition, all this stuff can they be all tied together because there's some unifying principles behind that, like the spirit realm, whatever that might mean? Or is it a bunch of very different things that we don't understand? And it's very confusing because we have lumped them all together in something. So I don't know.
Making it simple at the baseline level, the UFO phenomenon for me is like you start with what we know and what we think we know. Certainly it could all be lies, but I, for me, like, I go to, and again we talked about this earlier, but like, I don't go to, or try not to go to, belief or skeptic. Like, and what I mean by that is everything has a % chance of being true, or a percent chance of likelihood of occurring, or fact, or whatever. And if you take it to 100%, you're a believer, and if you take it to 0%, you're a skeptic. And so it's like the UFO phenomenon, to say, well, it's 100%, I'm 100% real. Well, you're a UFO believer. If you're religious and you take that to 100%, well, you're a believer. By definition, you're a believer. You call yourself a believer. If you're a skeptic, then you take it to 0%. But the truth is almost always somewhere in between. You know, it's always some percentage. It's always some percentage between 0 and 100. And for me, with the UFO thing, I'm very close to 100. so, again, I don't take anything to 100, but that one. Man, I mean,
but 100 on what? That something is happening?
Yes.
That's okay.
Yeah.
See, I have for at this point, anyone who's like it's nothing, that nothing is happening.
Nothing
I'm
to
like,
see.
I don't even want to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I can't, it's not even worth talking to you, bro. 'Cause
Exactly.
It's clear that something's
There's
going
something
on.
going
Yeah.
on.
I agree with that.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's, you know, for the UFO thing, for me, there's something happening. There's something there. And what I believe, if anything, is people. And people who have had experiences, you know, and like so you don't have to be a believer if you're an experiencer, if you've seen these things. And there are millions of people that have seen, you know, something, whether it's a government ship.
Have you ever seen anything?
I have, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have, yeah.
Nice.
My wife and I saw one. We were with another person, and it was this massive triangle,
Whoa.
black triangle with, looks like the color of that pyramid behind your head, a ball right in the middle of it, big ball of light, and it was just, you know, it was maybe.
So you saw a structured craft.
I saw a structured craft.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
It was maybe the size of like you know, 4 airplanes. You know, something
Wow.
like that. You know, 4 or 5 airplanes was about the size of it. I mean, it was freaking huge, massive, no sound. Didn't make any sound at all. It was about 8,000, 10,000 feet. It was below the cloud level here in Florida. So whatever that is, I think it looked like it, if I'm guessing, about 8,000 feet, which is very visible, you know, very, very, like it was a large object in the sky and just traveling silently towards the east.
Was it a mass sighting?
No, 3 of us. I mean, it was 3 of us sitting outside, and I looked up and saw it, and I'm like, you know, start freaking out, and you know, they both look at it and are like, "Oh my God," you know, kind of a thing, and like, you know, I got up and kind of, you know, like just tried to, because it was disappearing kind of behind the tree line, so I tried to, you know, keep going to watch it for as long as I possibly could.
Yeah.
And, you know, so that was maybe another 20 seconds or so, you know, and then I, you know, kind of. Run by them to go out into this opening to try to see if I could still see it, you know, again after that. And they're talking about something else already, and I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "Are you guys seriously on to the next conversation? Like, what is going on here?" You know? So I'm like hauling ass trying to catch this, you know, thing. Like, please take me with you, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it, you know, it could have been Raytheon, you know, it could have been like some massive, huge government thing that we don't know anything, you know, that we. It could have been.
I think
it doesn't have to be aliens.
Sure.
You know, it could be, but
the idea now is that it seems like there's this information coming out that the implication is there are projects that build things like that because they have been reverse engineering crashed objects, and they have, some of which they may have recovered from archaeological sites.
Right. Yeah. Which Bob Lazar told us 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, like, we've known about that.
That's the thing that really just blows me away about this whole thing, is how many resources that the government has been dedicating and dumping into researching this. And then they're like, nothing to see.
Right.
It's like, what do you mean?
Right.
Why did you make all these agencies to do this?
Well, now they're telling us it's real.
Yeah.
Like, now they're like, you know, so it was, you know, 50 years ago, if you were a skeptic, you're like, no, UFOs aren't real. And now if you're a skeptic, you're like, UFOs are real, you know, because the government is telling us these are real. Like, this is, we're studying this, you know, they're like, this is a real phenomenon. So yeah, it's completely changed. It's completely flipped on its head. And, you know, for me, I guess a couple of the big things where it was like it keeps inching closer to 100. You know, for me was like that aerial school mass sighting when you have like 200 school children that all see the same thing. You know, that all like, and I mean, kids that are between the age of kindergarten and 8th grade. You know, like a couple hundred kids saw this, and like those kids aren't lying. You know, you can see them. They're interviewed today. They're interviewed, you know, 30 years ago when it happened. They're telling the exact same story. They're talking about how it like screwed up their lives, and like you know, that people think they're crazy, and it's like, I don't know, you know, you can see it. You can tell when people are telling the truth and when people are like acting and lying. And these kids, these people are not. And then the that the Nimitz,
Yeah.
the Nimitz incident
Yep.
is like, it's like, come on, like
The
what-
Navy has had a lot of encounters.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Yeah, for sure. But to capture that one on, FLIR, forward-looking infrared, to capture it with 4 pilots, to capture it, to lock onto it, and then it zips off at like whatever, 15,000 miles per hour, and it shows up like, it's like, it's crazy. Like that, like we have that documented, like that happened. Like, so it's like the phenomenon's real. Like there's something going on, and it's like,
There have always been fascinating, not always, but there are some fascinating stories with the Navy, and like when you start looking at the USO question, like the unidentified submarine objects,
right.
and that a lot of these things go in and out of the water.
Yep.
And so then you start thinking, yeah, they got bases down there. And it would be, it's most of the surface of the planet.
Yeah.
First of all.
Yeah, so they could have more cities than we have.
There may be more of them on this planet than us. We just don't know. If they're sufficiently deep and quiet enough, or they're able to mask their presence, or maybe
they're in caves under there.
Maybe it's just been recently with technology that we're starting to see them, and there's kind of an interaction going on. And that may be why the government's just like, they don't want to talk about it, because it's like, well, if people start getting the idea that they're not coming from space, they might go out into space, but their origins are here, and they've been here a long time, and there's a lot of them here, and they live underwater and underground, and you just see this in ancient texts again. There are people the ant people that saved the Hopi. They came out from under the ground. They were like, hey, there's going to be a cataclysm. Come down here with us and survive, and then we'll let you back out later. And the implication is they stayed down there, and they're still down there.
Okay.
And then you're like, well, who are the ant people?
Yeah. I don't know about the ant people.
Yeah, it's one of the stories. That the Hopi supposedly emerged after the most recent destruction.
Okay.
Somewhere near the Grand Canyon, and their ancestors emerged there, and they had been saved by the ant people.
Okay.
Who live underground.
Okay.
Or like the name could be just like, maybe these were miners.
Yeah.
If you're standing far away and you see a whole bunch of people coming in and out of a hole in the ground, you're like, wow, they look like ants.
Yeah.
And then the ant people are like, hey, there's something in the sky coming.
Yeah.
You guys come underground with us, because we'll shut all the doors and lock all the airlocks, and we're gonna have to live down here for a couple generations, and then we'll let you back out once the surface conditions are okay. But are those aliens, or do they also live here?
Right.
And are they underwater? Going back to the Navy stories, I maybe I shouldn't even bring this up because I don't have any of the details. But there was this story of a whole Navy, like a carrier and a whole bunch of ships back and forth off the California coast, chasing something underwater that was like an anomalous signal. And later they were like, well, that was a whale or whatever. It's like, no, dude. You had your whole
scrambled all
carrier
these
group
ships.
all the way down the California coast to Mexico, and then turn around and come all the way back up because you guys are trying to figure out what this is. Like, if is it a submarine or whatever.
Yeah.
But it was faster than all of you were. And you never figured it out.
Right. Yeah.
It's a
I'm
whale.
pretty sure they've seen whales before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
What do they call it? I can't remember the idea that they can come out of space into the atmosphere, down into the water, and back out. What it's called? Transmedium vehicles.
Yeah.
We have nothing that can do that.
No, we don't. Right.
Not.
Well, in the Nimitz incident, you had something drop from 80,000 feet, which was the max that the radar could show. So something from space, to like very close to sea level.
Yeah, down to the deck, like you said.
Right. Very within a second and a half, and all of a sudden, you lose the object that you had in space. You pick up the object, right at sea level, and it's the exact same spot. They scramble the jets. They go out, they look at it, they get 4 eyewitnesses. There's something under the water that's creating this disturbance under the water, and this tic-tac bouncing around over it. It's like, what's going on?
Yeah.
like what the actually is going on here?
Yes.
But yeah, I like to think that that there is that the highest level of evolution is towards peace, and that there are probably multiple species within our own galaxy that have evolved towards that, and that if anybody crazy like us comes along with the ability to send nukes out and destroy other planets or other parts of the galaxy, then they're going to step in. And I think that's kind of what we saw in the 40s when we started to see all these UFOs arrive and, all of this.
They have been forming religions for a long time, though, which is weird. But this is the question of, like, is this the same phenomena? This is another thing that is, I think, Diana Pasulka's latest work is talking about this. If you go through American Cosmic, and there's an audiobook version of this, it's really good because she's a religious scholar, and then she's looked at the very ancient accounts of people who were having mystical experiences that led them to further religious stuff, and then she's like comparing them to UFO things, and she's like, they're the same. It's the same thing. They look exactly the same. The stuff that's happened to Chris Bledsoe, where he's basically has the beautiful woman that comes down and says, be not afraid. This is your burden to bear. Tell this story. This encounter has happened multiple times throughout history, and it is, a lot of times we encounter it as a myth or a religious tale, but it's still happening to people now. So is that the same phenomena?
Yeah.
Is this part of the UFO phenomena, or is it something else? And if it's part of it, then they have been, maybe not purposefully, but they have been forming religions, or people have been forming religions around the experiences that people have with them since the beginning of time. Right.
Yeah, it's not the UFOs that are necessarily saying, worship me or create this religion.
But they do say things like, go out and give this message, which is very, it may not be forming a religion, but it's like, go tell people like what I said to you.
What are the messages?
The message is sometimes that, there is something more. It's often a message of peace. It can often be a message of war.
You'll receive the kingdom of heaven if you behave a certain way.
Yeah. It's
that all makes sense to me. Yeah.
It does?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it totally does.
That's good.
Yeah, heaven is balance for me.
I think we should be quiet.
Yeah.
I think that shouting in the jungle is a bad idea.
Yeah. I agree. Setting off nukes is probably being loud. Yeah.
Well, okay. This is interesting because if you're taking the jungle analogy, it's like we live next to a waterfall, the sun. It's really loud.
Yeah.
So we can drop rocks, we can build things, we can set little campfires, and for the most part, the rest of the jungle will not be aware that we're making noise because we're right next to a big waterfall that's really loud. But if you do something that's louder than the waterfall, like if we do something that's louder than the sun, makes more noise than the sun for a little bit of time, then the whole universe will see it. I mean, eventually the light has to travel outwards, but it'll go outward in a bubble at light speed. Right. And so some of the nukes that we blew up, maybe if somebody's looking at exactly the right time, they might notice that. And that bubble is going outwards.
Yeah.
And it always is expanding and getting wider.
Yeah. But with quantum entanglement, I mean, they could instantaneously know.
That's true.
I mean, just without...
I'm just talking about conventional science.
Yeah.
Right now, there's a 50 light year or 100 light year wide bubble of space that knows that we've been loud a few times.
Right. Yeah. No doubt. Yeah. They might know right away. They might know at light speed. I kind of think they would know right away. I kind of think that that would happen very quickly.
There could be. I mean, there's obviously plenty of science we don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
The whole quantum field vibrates when we do something, and the entire universe knows about it.
Right.
Instantly.
Man, that's just
right.
nuts.
Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you should definitely be quiet.
Yes. Be quiet.
Because they know as soon as you do something loud.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Well, that was a deep rabbit hole.
I like your optimism.
Your optimism is great.
Yeah.
I've been getting this
just
doom
don't
and
shout
gloom
it
for the past
too loud.
few years.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how optimistic it is. I mean, if we continue down the path that we're going down, it's gosh.
Your optimism is in the greater picture.
Yeah.
You're basically saying, well, no, like they couldn't get this advanced if they were warlike. So we must assume that they are probably peaceful.
Yeah.
So if we ever make it there, we're going to meet friends.
I've been on board with that idea for a long time, but then I started thinking about just how big the universe is, and I'm like, somewhere out there is a super predator.
Yeah.
Because they overcame all the odds of like destroying themselves, and now they're incredibly advanced and they're very dangerous. And they will destroy any galactic federation they find, especially if they're peaceful.
Yeah, but they eat up their entire planet, I guess. If they're predators, then they've consumed,
so
they've consumed their entire planet and
whole star systems, entire clusters, entire galaxies.
Yeah.
They don't care.
Yeah.
Like a plague of locusts, they just keep moving outwards.
I think good always wins. I think that ultimately
I can get behind that.
Yeah.
But,
I think that it's just more intelligent. It's just it has the collective in mind as opposed to the it's driven not by fear or dominance or the little me, the insignificant self. It's driven by the desire for the collective whole to thrive, and that's much more powerful than I think a predator type of a species could ever be. But that's just me.
But in nature, on our planet, which is what we have to look at, the predators are all at the top.
Yeah, for sure. Right.
So
until we're not.
Yeah.
You know,
but
until we're back in the Stone Age.
But once we're back in the Stone Age, the other predators are now on top of us.
Yeah,
in other words, it's always a predator that's at the very top of the...
It is because we haven't achieved that level of evolution yet.
Okay.
You know, I think that once...
So we can evolve past being predators and then you become something else.
Yeah, you move from evolving physically to evolving mentally and spiritually. And we haven't really begun to evolve spiritually yet. You know, and I think that once that starts to happen, and there's a movement now that's happening amongst people that are becoming more conscious, that are actually becoming conscious and not dominated by their minds. And as that happens and as that starts to take hold, we realize that it's not that our survival isn't dependent upon who's the biggest, strongest, fastest, who can kill the most. We start to evolve spiritually, and as we start to evolve spiritually, then we can accomplish the things that we can accomplish. We have to, and it oftentimes, you know, getting to that point takes getting to a very, very low place, and you know, so you know, you have to go through the terrible times to get to to get to heaven, you know, to get to you know what I would call balance.
But this is what happens when you talk about the UFO topic.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like it's almost like at this point you can't separate it from this type of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, there seems to be that weird connection.
Yeah.
I would be fine with just nuts and bolts.
Right.
But it seems like there's
not
way more than that.
Yeah.
There are nuts and bolts. There's also a bunch of other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Their nuts and bolts are built with
And
mind.
I still think we're eventually we'll do all this evolving. We'll join this Galactic Federation. They'll be like, "Can you guys be quiet? Like, there's
Just chill out."
the universe is a big place."
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I mean, the one other thing that I wanted to kind of hear from you, because I know you guys have done a tremendous amount of work on it, is the path of the pole. You know, you've completed your 11 episodes, and they're like, you know, 2-3 hours each. Is incredible stuff, incredible work. But like, I don't think you have anywhere, you know, like a summary of all of that work in terms of, you know, what it all means, what's happening, what's, you know.
Yeah.
So if can you guys walk the audience from the very beginning?
Can you summarize
from the very beginning?
11 episodes?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
33 hours of content in 20 minutes.
Yeah. So the idea, first of all, that we do not understand all of the physics involved in what's beneath our feet, the crust and how it interacts with the mantle. There's a lot of interesting science being done about that. Earth vibrational frequencies, you know, plate tectonics, all these things. At the time of that book, plate tectonics wasn't actually even a thing.
It had not been fully accepted.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but the basic idea is it possible for something to happen that might get the whole entire crust of the Earth moving, sliding around on the outside of the Earth? And it seems implausible at first glance, but when you go through the path of the pole, the book by Charles Hapgood, I mean, he lays out a very convincing case. Now, it's not just how could this happen, but he's looking at evidence
that it has
happened in the actual geological layers, in where trees were growing, are in areas that don't even receive enough light due to the tilt of the Earth. Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of stuff like that, and it is a fascinating idea, and it could possibly explain some of the strange cataclysmic events that we see in our past.
Okay.
And it needs to be separated from people. Just to be clear, we're not talking about magnetic fields Now they may be involved in some way, but not the magnetic
People
poles.
talk about a pole shift, and sometimes they mean the
Only
magnetic,
the
field
magnetic
reversing.
And we're also not talking about the shifting of the actual axis of the Earth into some other position, but it's the crust sliding around on the axis.
So the axis stays in the same
Yes.
tilt, and what is that, 23 and a half degrees or something like
Yeah.
that currently. But that
There's a
That
nod.
does have a nod.
that
yeah.
does, yeah. And then you've got the magnetic field, which is completely unrelated to what you guys are talking about. I'd love your thoughts on the magnetic field.
It's had many reversals, and that's accepted science.
no
now.
doubt. No
Yes.
doubt. Yeah. But like, what's happening with it now?
Right.
It is
Now-
moving now.
It's
It's
moving.
accelerating.
It
ass
seems
right now.
unstable.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Which brings into question what is causing it. Like,
Right.
what is that? There's a dynamo down there somewhere that's generating this huge magnetic field.
That's what it's
in
thought
the
to be.
core.
Yeah, in the core, and it's so why is it in motion?
Right.
Is
right.
does that imply disturbance in the system that's
Right.
causing it? Yeah.
Right.
Disturbance in the force.
Yeah. And it's not just the north magnetic pole, right? I mean, the north magnetic pole is since the 90s has been hauling
it's
ass
been
towards
moving.
Russia.
It's accelerating. Yeah.
It's accelerating.
I
no
haven't
doubt,
been able
yeah.
to find much about the south magnetic pole.
It's moving. It's moving, and it seems like they're moving towards the same direction. And,
Right.
And it seems like the direction that they're moving towards is opposite of the South Atlantic anomaly, which is that
Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah. Well, no, it's between South America and Africa.
Okay, the South Atlantic
The South
anomaly,
Atlantic
yeah.
anomaly. Yeah. It's this place. It's this massive patch of the Earth's where the magnetic field is extraordinarily weak. And so like satellites oftentimes have to power down going into it because of the radiation. And the north and south magnetic poles seem to be moving to the opposite side of the Earth
antipode.
as that. Yeah.
Okay.
So
That's
what's
interesting.
going on? Like what's actually going on with that?
Well, I've also been interested in these two giant blobs that are down in the mantle. Have you heard about these?
No.
Mysterious blobs.
The
In the mantle.
giant mysterious blobs in the mantle.
Oh, sweet.
One of them's under the Pacific Ocean. The other one, I can't remember exactly where it is, but I think the big one is under
Yeah,
the Pacific.
it's relics of a massive collision.
So this is their belief. This is the modern science explaining how the moon got there. So we were run into by another planet.
Yeah. That's the
And
dumbest thing.
but there are definitely these
So
giant
stupid.
blobs that are down in the mantle that have a different density
there's a good.
than the rest of
Okay.
the mantle.
Okay.
Now
They're like sitting on top of the core, extruding up into
that
the
is
mantle.
a great diagram,
Yeah.
my friend.
Wow.
That's a good one. I've never seen that. But it just made me think about that in terms of the magnetic pole. It'd be interesting to see if there's a correlation.
Yep.
Because I wonder what the magnetism of those blobs are and if it's more magnetic or different, or maybe their polarities or they have their own polarities. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, to go back to the path of the
Yeah,
pole.
path of the pole. So magnets are weird and they're doing the wrong things. Still path of the
Magnets are
pole.
weird.
The other thing that people associate with pole shift is the entire axis possibly flipping over or changing.
Yeah.
And that isn't out of the realm of possibility, but if you're just going by conventional physics, it requires a large outside force acting on the Earth, like a very dense, like a gravitational well passing by, like another planet. Like if Mars came really close and did a flyby, it could alter Earth's its axis of the entire body of the planet.
Yeah, so that it's spinning in a different orientation.
Right.
Yeah.
But
you
we're
think
just talking about the crust
it's like a
sliding.
gyroscope. It's not easy to
Right.
take it off its axis. It
Right.
wants to stay in the same place, and the only way to do that would be to like actually affect it with a large outside force. I think
Right.
there may be internal physics that take a long time to happen, like some kind of cyclical thing where it will automatically flip over. Like what's the effect that people have shown with the?
Yeah, there's like a wing nut.
It's named
they
after
spin
a
in
Russian guy.
outer space.
Yeah,
He,
so
like,
he spins the wing nut off of like it's a handle
off of a bolt.
and it spins off, and it's got an axis in this direction and an axis in this direction, and it's rotating, and then it automatically will flip over and rotate this way, and then flip over and rotate this way.
Okay.
If there's something like that principle acting inside the Earth because of these blobs,
Here it is,
whatever.
watch this.
Yeah, there. Watch. He spins it.
So that's an off center. It's got this weird
Wow.
center of gravity, and this other thing that once see that thing has its own sort of precessional like wobble.
Yeah.
No, it's showing you in slow motion.
So there's your normal precession, and then it
So if there's something like this principle happening inside the Earth,
Yeah.
but it just takes a lot of rotations before and then you can see that it's a catastrophic reversal.
Yeah.
It happens in one spin.
I think the thing, if
Yeah.
you plot it out, it actually it shows like a spiral or whatever the motion that it goes in.
Okay.
So anyway, could the Earth go through some cyclical thing like that? And so we just don't know because the last time it happened was 400,000 years ago. But we're coming up on another one, and soon that the whole thing is just going to start rolling over, and that would be catastrophic. I mean, absolutely, water would be sloshing out of all the oceans and spilling across the land, and it would just be insane.
This
Every
goes back to
volcano on
my-
the planet would go off.
Yeah. It goes back to my episode, "The Day the Earth Stood Still." It's
We're gonna have to check it out.
Yeah, we're gonna have to watch it.
Yeah, same kind of thing. If the Earth did do that for even just a brief moment, and the oceans continued with their momentum,
And the winds, like all the wind, the atmosphere would be doing it to you. You'd have 1,000-mile-an-hour winds.
Right.
You'd have 1,000-mile high waves.
Yep.
Not 1,000 miles, but like
1,000
feet.
10,000 feet potentially.
Yeah.
2 mile high anyway.
It would be catastrophic. And has that happened before?
Yeah.
But Path of the Pole
Yeah.
is not about any of that.
Okay. All right. What's Path of the Pole about? It's hard not to
That's
go
what
off
it's
on
not
tangents.
So we've gotten that far. This is why it took 11 episodes.
Right. He went through a lot of it, and I think, like Kyle was sort of saying, I think that at this point, some of his evidence that he's presented in the book can possibly be explained just by very long
Hapgood?
Yeah, Hapgood. So the very long process of the crustal, the tectonic plate movement.
Yeah.
So some of the stuff he's looking at, he's like, look, there were if there's extremely clear evidence of massive ice cover in places in Africa, in India, which is too close to the equator for there to be any ice, and also the ice is moving in the wrong direction, right? In other words, it's moving north, which implies that it formed in the south and went northward, which is not what you would expect. It usually forms at the colder, the higher latitudes and goes south, at least in the northern hemisphere. So,
but don't we know that like Antarctica has been under ice for like at least a few million years based on ice samples?
Well,
it seems to have gone. It's like phases.